Today we have gathered footage that is hard to look away from. Disturbing, strange, and almost impossible scenes captured by people in various corners of the planet. Some call them simply natural phenomena. Some call them quiet warnings. And some are convinced that ancient prophecies suddenly started speaking in a far too familiar language. In this episode of Top Facts, we are not trying to convince you to believe in mysticism. We are simply showing events that make you freeze, look up at the sky, and catch yourself thinking, what if the world is trying to tell us much more than we are ready to hear? Enjoy watching. Not far from a military territory, eyewitnesses filmed bright red flashes in the clouds. They appeared and extinguished, illuminating the sky with uneven impulses. It seemed as if something was moving behind the cloud layer, and the light only for a second gave away its presence. When an oddity occurs next to a closed facility, versions are born instantly. Secret tests, unknown technology, an atmospheric experiment, or something more mysterious. Skeptics talk about lightning, signal lights, or reflections, but the witnesses were alerted by the silence. The flashes disappeared just as suddenly as they appeared, and people never received an articulate answer. And in such stories, it is not only the light that frightens, the silence after it frightens. During a lunar eclipse, people watched as the disk of the moon filled with copper red. This hue is called a blood moon. It appears when sunlight passes through the atmosphere of the Earth, scatters, and tints the moon. Science describes the process extremely precisely, but the symbolic power does not go anywhere. In ancient texts, a red moon always stood next to warnings and great events. And every time it rises above the horizon, millions of people remember not physics, but prophecies. A worker was looking down from the height of a building when a smoky spiral spun in the sky. It appeared suddenly, twisted as if a funnel opened in the air and almost immediately melted away. Such a thing could be the trail of a rocket, a vortex flow, a play of light, or the scattering of particles in the atmosphere. But on video, it looked almost like a real portal. It is no coincidence that viewers started talking about a window between worlds. In December of the year 2024, over Tulsa, according to eyewitnesses, there appeared something resembling a grid of glowing blue squares. The pattern did not last long, about 20 seconds, but it looked so even that people compared it to a secret construction behind the clouds. Perhaps it was about a projection, reflection, or a rare combination of light and a cloud layer. However, visually it was a very strong phenomenon. Not chaotic flashes, not lightning, but exactly order. An order in the sky frightens stronger than chaos, because it forces one to think as if there is someone's design behind it. When the moon is painted a copper red color, even people far from religion freeze for a second. During a total lunar eclipse, the Earth blocks sunlight, and the atmosphere lets predominantly red hues through to the moon. Science explains this beautifully and accurately, but ancient texts saw in a red moon a sign of great changes, and the symbolism has not disappeared anywhere. Therefore, every such shot exists simultaneously in two worlds, astronomical and prophetic. And perhaps it is precisely the combination of science and ancient fear that makes the blood moon one of the strongest celestial images. At sunset, tourists noticed a cloud resembling the figure of Jesus. The light around it created a soft halo, and the resemblance turned out to be so strong that people began to film, show each other, and discuss what they saw as a possible sign. Skeptics call this pareidolia. The brain finds familiar shapes in random objects. We recognize faces in stones, animals in spots, and figures in clouds. But sometimes the coincidence turns out to be too exact for the emotion to simply disappear. In Tehran, people encountered a frightening phenomenon. Dark rain started falling from the sky, leaving oily marks on cars, glass, and hands. Eyewitnesses showed black drops and tried to understand what exactly was falling from above. Versions included pollution, acid precipitation, industrial emissions, and particles of petroleum products. If the cause is indeed air pollution, then this is not mysticism, but a very earthly alarm. Over a small town, the clouds began to move, and then bright blue lights flared in the sky. They changed shape, as if contracting into a single center, and soon viewers saw a sphere surrounded by rings. To some, it looked like an angelic sign, to others an energy object, or a rare atmospheric phenomenon. Such scenes are interesting because every viewer completes them according to their inner world. A believer sees a blessing, a skeptic sees optics, a mystery lover sees a visit of something unknown. And the most curious thing here is that the same frame is capable of splitting people into three different realities. One evening, residents saw two bright objects side by side in the sky. One was the ordinary moon, and the second resembled its blurred double. Then this double began to shift, as if moving along its own trajectory, and soon disappeared. Possible explanations are a reflection in the camera, a lens flare, thin clouds, a satellite, or a drone. But eyewitnesses were hooked by the very idea of a second moon. The moon is one of the most stable reference points of humanity. We are used to there being one. And when a similar object appears nearby, the world seems to make a mistake. For a second, it seems that the celestial rules have changed, and we were the last to know about it. On the 27th of January, 2012, after a severe hail, a resident discovered small blue jelly-like balls in his garden. They did not melt, did not dissolve in water, and were not solid. When people tried to pick them up, they fell apart and slipped between fingers. The versions sounded different: atmospheric pollution, polymer granules, plant particles, or material brought by a storm. But to the eyewitness, it looked like something that fell from the sky without any understandable reason. In Canada, witnesses noticed a long glowing object in the sky, similar to a rod. A field seemed to flicker around it, and smoky trails stretched from both ends. The object remained visible not for long, and then gradually dissolved. There are enough versions: a fragment of a rocket, an airplane trail, a meteor, an optical illusion, or a rare combination of light and clouds. But the shape was so unusual that viewers were not in a hurry to accept simple answers. Some footage catches not by scale, but by geometry: a sphere, a cross, a ring, a rod. The human brain instantly turns a shape into meaning. In April of the year 2013, a driver on a quiet road in Russia noticed a strange green glow above the horizon. It did not look like an ordinary reflection from the ground, and more resembled light hidden behind the clouds. Perhaps it was the northern lights, a reflection of an industrial source, an atmospheric effect, or a feature of the camera. But the absence of a clear explanation made the video long-lasting. It is still perceived as a small mystery from the past. And this is an important point. Mystical videos rarely die if there remains at least one unanswered question in them. In one video, a small village is covered by a huge swarm of locusts. The insects clog the air so densely that the space turns into a living storm. Such invasions have happened in different regions, leaving behind eaten fields and general anxiety. Scientists link such outbreaks to weather, humidity, abundance of food, and the reproductive features of insects. But for the people caught inside the swarm, terminology does not help. When millions of wings are around, it seems as if nature itself decided to show its numbers. Two friends were walking in the evening when they noticed a group of glowing dots in the sky. They stayed together, building a strange formation, and moved not at all like airplanes. Soon, a person passing by reported that they saw exactly the same thing. There are many possible explanations: drones, satellites, atmospheric reflections, military tests, or an optical effect. But the video never gave a final answer. The lights hovered, slowly shifted, and disappeared. On the 9th of February, 2024, in the Indian city of Pune, eyewitnesses filmed a vortex of insects. Dark, rotating columns, similar to tornadoes, rose over the streets. People hurried under roofs, and the sky seemed alive. Specialists linked the phenomenon to the Mutha River. Polluted water rich in nutrients creates ideal conditions for the mass reproduction of insects. Under the right weather, they gather into huge swarms. but on video it looks like a small apocalypse. Nature does not always come as an earthquake. Sometimes a cloud of insects is enough for a city to understand. Control over the surrounding world is a very conditional thing. Sometimes the sky looks as if for a second it stops being just the sky. According to eyewitnesses, this is exactly what happened in Austin, state of Texas. A golden glow flared up over the city. It seemed to push the clouds apart, open an invisible door, and then contracted back into a single point. Shortly before this, residents heard echoing blows, similar to distant trumpets from which the ground vibrated. Some called it an atmospheric effect. Others remembered ancient images of skies opening up. And what frightens in such footage is not the light itself, but the feeling that we are seeing only a fragment of something much larger. On a busy road, people filmed a moment resembling a scene from a disaster movie. Thousands of birds filled the sky, circled over cars, and descended so low that drivers did not understand whether to keep driving or hit the brakes. Science knows such flocks as murmurations. Birds synchronously change direction, almost instantly reacting to each other. But the viewers were amazed not only by the numbers. The movement seemed too sharp and collected, as if nature was drawing a warning in the air. In such seconds, even a skeptic asks himself, is this instinct or a sign? In another video, clouds twisted as if a giant vortex of light was forming above the ground. At first, it looked like a play of the weather, but then the shape began to resemble a hole behind the cloud layer. Specialists explain such a thing by winds, humidity, illumination, and the structure of clouds. But millions of viewers saw not meteorology, but a portal, a passageway through which something impossible is about to appear. This is how the effect of such videos is born. There may be an explanation, but the anxiety after viewing still remains. In California, an eyewitness filmed the sunrise over Los Angeles, and it looked not like the beginning of the day, but like a scene after a catastrophe. Because of the thick smoke from forest fires, the sun rose in a heavy orange haze, and the silhouettes of the city became like the sets of an apocalyptic film. The explanation is simple. Smoke particles scatter light and change the color of the sky. But the simplicity of the explanation does not make the footage any less disturbing. This is exactly the case where mysticism does not even need to be invented. The real warning is already here. In a remote area, people noticed a green light hovering in the sky. It did not make a sound, did not blink like an airplane, and did not move like an ordinary drone. The glow slowly changed direction, as if following a preset route. There are enough versions: atmospheric glow, laser, reflection, machinery, or a camera effect. But to eyewitnesses, it seemed that this was exactly a signal. Not a flash and not a random glare, but a message left right above the horizon. A man was walking down a quiet street in Memphis and noticed a small flame right on the asphalt. It did not look like a bonfire, nor like burning trash. The fire stayed in one place, as if coming out of the road itself. Rational versions abound: a gas leak, fuel residue, a chemical reaction, or an accident on underground communications. But on the internet, the video was quickly dubbed a road fault. Commentators started talking about a portal, a crack, and gates into something dark. It sounds fantastic. And yet a fire rising from the ground affects a person stronger than a normal fire. The surface under our feet is obligated to be reliable. And when it suddenly starts to burn, it seems that something fundamental has been broken. Residents of a small city saw a huge, heavy mass of cloud descending from the sky. It hung so low that it looked almost like a material object. Some ran outside to film, while others, on the contrary, hurried to take cover at home. And then the strangest thing happened. Water seemed to stretch out of the cloud. The stream fell down not quite like ordinary rain, and the footage looked as if an invisible force was pumping moisture right out of the sky. A possible version is a local downpour, a waterspout, or a rare form of precipitation. But eyewitnesses admitted that, at that moment, they did not care about terminology at all. Among the dunes of Saudi Arabia, a dark spot resembling a lake of black ink was noticed. It spread across the sand and formed channels as if the desert had begun to bleed oil. Later, it was suggested that this could be crude oil that came to the surface. A desert is associated with dryness and stillness, and here a dark liquid emerges from underneath it. To some, this is geology. To others, a sign that the planet is letting out what is hidden. A tourist at a waterfall saw an effect that seems impossible. The flow of water did not fall down, but seemed to rise into the air. In reality, a strong wind near high cliffs can tear the water, turn it into fog, and toss it up. But even knowing this, it is hard to tear oneself away from the spectacle. A waterfall is an understandable symbol of gravity. Water falls down. When it violates the rule, the brain perceives the frame as a glitch in the very arrangement of the world. In Iran, a man filmed the moment when a dark liquid with the smell of crude oil started coming out of the ground next to an ATM. To passers-by, it looked incredible. In the middle of a city street, the surface seemed to break open and let out what is usually hidden deep underground. Probably the cause was connected to underground communications, a leak, or the features of local oil layers. But symbolically, the scene is almost perfect. A person comes for money, and the ground nearby starts giving out black gold. Sometimes reality itself invents metaphors that a screenwriter would find hard to compose better. The area of Mount Ararat has long been associated with the search for the legendary Noah's Ark. Recently, attention was again drawn to a massive shape in the earth, resembling the outlines of an ancient vessel. Supporters of the version talk about scans, soil layers, and structures similar to compartments. Skeptics answer that this could be a natural geological form created by erosion. But the story of the Ark is so deeply rooted in culture that any similar contour instantly becomes a world event. People look not just for wood or stone. They look for proof that the ancient story was once a reality. A solar eclipse always affects people unusually. The day dims, the temperature drops, the birds go silent, and the crowds on the streets look up in almost complete silence. For astronomers, this is the exact mechanics of celestial bodies. For millions of viewers, it is a feeling as if someone turned off the familiar order of the world for a minute. In religious texts, the darkening of the sun is often placed next to the image of the final judgment and great upheavals. Therefore, when people first discuss a red moon and then a shadow covers the sun, people inadvertently string these events onto one thread. Sometimes the human mind itself pieces together a prophecy from the ordinary calendar of nature. In the foggy waters of the Antarctic, cruise passengers made out the silhouette of an old ship, as if it had come out of the past. The outlines seemed battered but recognizable, and the video quickly acquired the atmosphere of a sea legend. Another time at the Mukilteo terminal in Washington, a large fishing vessel drifted without a visible crew, lights, or steering, and the ferry had to stop. The sea always gives birth to stories about ghosts, because it itself resembles the border between worlds. It is easy to get lost there, disappear, and just as suddenly return as a silhouette in the fog. In Mexican Sonora, not far from Hermosillo, locals filmed a giant crack that split the desert. The fault stretched across the sand, as if the surface of the planet was coming apart right at the seam. Geologists write this off as soil movement, groundwater, land subsidence, and rock tension. But standing at the edge of such a crack, it is hard to believe in these terms. The Earth, which we are used to considering a support, suddenly shows that it is alive, mobile, and unpredictable. And this is, perhaps, one of the most ancient human fears. On the Iranian island of Hormuz, rain painted both the water and the sand in a thick red color. To eyewitnesses, it seemed as if in front of them was a river that had turned into blood. The explanation is quite earthly. The local soils are saturated with iron oxide, and during precipitation, the red dust mixes with water. But the symbolism turned out to be stronger than the chemistry. People immediately remembered old legends about waters that became blood and about ancient disasters. Nature does not utter a single word, but humans still hear a message in it. In Tulsa, a shop owner went out to take a look at the weather and saw orange-pink flashes above the clouds. They lasted for about 20 seconds, pulsated, and created a strange feeling, as if something was breathing beneath the clouds. No thunder, no familiar lightning, no ordinary thunderstorm. The glow looked as if the upper layer of reality had become transparent for a moment. Perhaps these were reflections or electrical discharges. But what the viewers remembered was a different feeling, as if the sky for a second showed its hidden construction. On the 27th of October, 2025, according to eyewitnesses, residents of Moscow saw a glowing orb that flew through the night sky and left a bright trail behind it. Instead of falling or exploding, the object simply dissolved in the air. Possible versions are a meteor, space debris, or an atmospheric phenomenon. But the witnesses were confused by the smooth movement and neat disappearance. It seemed as if the object did not burn up chaotically, but left the field of view far too controllably. In the area of Mission Valley in Montana, eyewitnesses filmed a dark cloud over snow-capped mountains. A funnel stretched downwards out of it, lifting snow and swirling the air. For a few seconds, it seemed as if the sky was reaching for the ridge. Meteorologists would start talking about a local vortex, a snow squall, or complex currents near mountains. But visually, it looked like a scene from a movie. A dark cloud, white peaks, and a thin bridge between them. Sometimes nature does not need to be supernatural to look incredible. The right place, light, and moment are enough. Antarctica is a place where, even today, it is easy to believe in the unknown. On footage from the icy region, a dark form inside an iceberg was made out. The outlines resembled something with branching limbs, similar to tentacles. On the internet, versions immediately appeared about an ancient sea creature, an unknown organism, something extraterrestrial. Scientists would be more cautious. This could well turn out to be a shadow, rock, cracks, algae, or ice features. But Antarctica amplifies any mystery. Traces of ancient worlds are indeed stored there, and man has explored far from everything. Residents of Houston noticed a cloud that gradually began to resemble the figure of an angel. The silhouette seemed to hover over the city and then slowly dissolved. Such footage has a simple psychological mechanism. Humans are inclined to see familiar shapes in random objects, especially if the shape is associated with hope or fear. But this does not make the experience of the eyewitnesses any less real. Sometimes a symbol is more important than its origin. If a city raises its heads for a couple of minutes and sees an angel in the sky, the very fact of a shared gaze already becomes an event. On Google Earth images near the southern tip of Patagonia, strange relief forms were noticed. When magnified, they resembled huge snakeheads stretched towards Antarctica. On the internet, this place instantly became overgrown with a mystical aura. Versions appeared about ancient structures, giants, forgotten civilizations, and symbols seemingly inscribed into the landscape. Skeptics nod at erosion, shadows, and the human habit of finding familiar shapes in random lines. But Patagonia itself looks like the edge of the world. Therefore, any mystery sounds louder there. And even if in front of us is just a relief, it reminds us. The Earth knows how to form shapes that read like a message. On the 13th of November, 2023, footage from Egypt spread across the internet. The water in the Nile, according to eyewitnesses, acquired a thick red hue. Scientists would surely start talking about algae, soil particles, pollution, or lighting features. But for millions of people, this image turned out to be far too recognizable. In the book of Exodus, the waters of the Nile turn red as one of the great warnings. Therefore, if something similar happens precisely in Egypt, the phenomenon immediately acquires an almost prophetic resonance. In Japan, they filmed a patch of land that rose and fell as if a huge lung was beneath it. The soil moved rhythmically, up, paused, down, and again. Probably such an effect can arise due to water, air under the roots, pressure in the soil, or the movement of a loose layer. But the name Breathing Earth stuck immediately because it perfectly describes the feeling. We are used to thinking of the planet as a solid support and not as a living body. And when the surface starts moving under our feet, this familiar confidence disappears. At a depth of almost 4,000 feet, researchers filmed a rare jellyfish, Halitrephis masi. In the darkness of the ocean, it looked like a transparent dome, and then flashed with pink, yellow, and blue hues, like fireworks underwater. This point differs from the rest. Here you do not need to look for a sign of the end times. It is enough to admit that the Earth itself still preserves beauty similar to extraterrestrial. And this is one of the strongest moments of the entire compilation. We look at the sky in search of miracles so often that we forget. Right underneath us is a whole universe where humans have almost never reached. The Euphrates in the area of Syrian Raqqa became a symbol of alarm for many. Where a mighty river should carry its waters, dry patches of the bottom, cracks, and exposed earth appeared. For the locals, this is not just an impressive shot, but a real misfortune. The water goes away, and along with it disappears the familiar way of life. The reasons are quite earthly: droughts, dams, climate change, wars, and intensive water use. But the Euphrates is no ordinary river. It occupies an important place in religious traditions, and its drying has long been associated with the expectation of great events. The Al-Aqsa Mosque is one of the most significant places on the planet. Therefore, any strange phenomenon above it instantly causes a huge resonance. In the discussed video, a glowing orb appears over the sacred complex. It seems to hover in the air, and then disappears. Skeptics talk about a drone, a reflection, editing, or an optical effect. Believers see a sign, protection, or the presence of a higher power. And here, not only the light itself is important, but also the place where it appeared. When the Boeing E-4B Nightwatch is noticed in the sky, conversations start instantly. This airplane is known as an airborne command center, created for crises when ground infrastructure might be under threat. Therefore, rare appearances inevitably cause alarm. People ask, is this a normal flight, an exercise, or preparation for something bigger? In reality, such machines exist for the sake of scenarios that the majority find unpleasant to think about. And in a compilation about strange signs, this point sounds particularly cold. Sometimes what frightens is not the sky with clouds, but the technology that humanity built in case of its own end. In New York, people saw the sun enveloped in a heavy dark shadow and an unusual glow. Passers-by stopped right in the middle of the streets, raised their phones, and looked up. The city, which usually does not freeze for a second, suddenly stood still. Scientists explained what was happening by an eclipse in cloud cover, but emotionally, such moments are always experienced stronger. A person might know the dates of eclipses in advance, understand orbits and calculations, and yet when the daylight changes right overhead, an ancient fear wakes up by itself. In the year 2025, footage of a glowing cross in the night sky spread across the internet. It's shown next to the moon, looked too even for an ordinary cloud, and forced many to start talking about a religious sign. Such shapes can arise due to airplane trails, ice crystals, or optical effects. But for those who watched in person, the technical explanation sounded dry. They saw not physics, but a symbol. Faith often begins where a random shape coincides with what a person already carries inside themselves. During the anniversary of the Iranian Revolution, viewers saw a huge figure of Baal engulfed in fire. In ancient myths, this name is associated with the cult of power and idols, so the footage quickly became overgrown with a symbolic reading. To some, this was part of a public performance. To others, a spectacle of the fall of old powers before a new era. Fire in a square does not yet prove a prophecy, but visually this is a very powerful scene. Videos where animals move in a circle always cause alarm. In one small town, a herd suddenly huddled together and started walking around a single point, as if obeying an invisible rhythm. People remembered stories about the strange behavior of animals before earthquakes and other disasters. Scientists explain such scenes with stress, diseases, herd instinct, enclosures, or a reaction to an external irritant. But the shot still hits the nerves. When animals behave not as we are used to, an ancient feeling wakes up. Perhaps they already hear what a human is not yet capable of catching. In Jinan, China, People saw outlines resembling the towers and walls of a huge castle above the horizon. Scientists call this a fata morgana, a complex mirage that arises due to layers of air of varying temperatures. But when a mirage is so detailed, it easily turns into a legend. For eyewitnesses, this was not a term from a textbook, but a whole city over a city, a silhouette of an invisible world on top of ordinary streets. Such footage brings back to us an almost childlike sense of wonder. In Tel Aviv, ordinary street traffic suddenly slowed down. People stopped, drivers reduced their speed, and a huge living shadow thickened over the road. It was not a storm and not smoke, but a giant flock of starlings. The birds moved as a single organism. They compressed, stretched, changed shape, and seemed to draw invisible signs in the air. Scientists call this a murmuration. This is how a flock defends itself from predators and stays together. But if you look from below, the explanation does not remove the feeling of anxiety. In antiquity, large flocks were often considered harbingers of disasters. And what frightens here is not the number of birds, but their incredible synchronicity, as if the sky for a minute became a screen on which nature showed a warning. In Jerusalem, archaeologists, if we are to believe a viral video, were conducting ordinary excavations when deep underground they allegedly stumbled upon a massive ancient chest. Almost immediately, a loud version arose. This could be the Ark of the Covenant, a shrine in which, according to biblical tradition, the tablets with the 10 Commandments were kept. There is no official confirmation of the find, and such statements should be treated with caution. But the very thought of the return of the lost artifact sounds like a plot capable of rewriting history. In one city, people were quietly spending their evening until the sky suddenly flared red. At first, it looked like the reflection of a distant fire. But then, tall scarlet pillars rose in the clouds. They flickered, pulsated, and looked as if the light came not from the ground, but from inside the sky itself. This could be explained by ice crystals, atmospheric reflections, or electrical flashes. But when the whole street is flooded with a red glow, the mind does not immediately accept a dry version. The red sky since ancient times has been associated with war, fire, judgment, and turning point events. Perhaps it was pure atmospheric physics. But sometimes physics looks as if someone deliberately chose the most alarming color. Not far from Area 51 in Nevada, a driver noticed dark smoke that hung in the air almost motionless. No obvious fire, no strong wind, no clear source. The cloud looked as if it had been placed in the sky and left there. Because of the filming location, versions poured out instantly. Military tests, secret technologies, an unknown apparatus, or the trace of an experiment. Rationally, it could be ordinary smoke stuck in a windless layer of air. But next to Area 51, even smoke stops being ordinary. The reputation of the place works here. The same picture in another area would quickly be forgotten. But near the most mysterious base of America, it turns into a story. After a severe storm, a man discovered that all surfaces around were covered with tiny black particles. At first, he took them for insects, but upon closer examination, they rather resembled fine metallic dust that seemed to move slightly. A possible cause is soot, minerals, dust, organic matter, or particles brought by the wind. Storms are indeed capable of carrying strange mixtures over vast distances. But what alarmed the witness was precisely the movement. After sunset over Scotland, a glowing oblong object appeared. It stayed almost completely still for several minutes, and people from different places saw it. The shape was too even for a cloud and too strange for an airplane, and then the object disappeared. Versions arose about satellites, drones, an atmospheric reflection, and an unknown apparatus. But what struck the witnesses was not only the glow, but a sense of intentionality. The object was not flying past and was not falling. It was simply present. In Vietnam, during a sudden storm, people saw something that is usually only found in ancient legends. Frogs began to fall from the sky. They ended up on roads, roofs, in yards, and right at houses. The video instantly became viral because what was happening looked almost impossible. Science knows of such cases. A strong wind or a waterspout is capable of lifting small animals from a body of water, carrying them a distance, and dropping them along with the rain. But even understanding the mechanism, it is impossible to shake off the feeling of strangeness. In southern Zamboanga, a passerby stopped to film two fiery objects falling in the night sky almost side by side. They burned brightly, rushed fast, and left a complete sensation of atmospheric entry. Most likely these were meteors or fragments of space debris. But no one ever understood where they disappeared and whether anything reached the ground. It is the very absence of a finale that gave rise to versions about other objects and hidden observers. One fiery trail is easily written off as chance. Two side by side already look like an event. And when no one shows the point of impact, the story continues to burn in the imagination of the viewers. In some areas of Australia, the day suddenly became like a Martian storm. The blue sky disappeared, and the streets, houses, and cars drowned in a red-orange, dusty haze. People went outside and did not understand why the familiar world changed color in minutes. Experts explain this by a powerful cyclone that raised dust saturated with iron oxide into the atmosphere. Simply put, the air filled with particles of rust, which turned the sunlight into a red filter. In the year 2020, residents of one district in China heard a strange sound which, according to them, came from the direction of the mountains and lasted for several days. It was sharp, loud, and so unusual that people went out to look for the source, but found nothing convincing. Similar sounds were also discussed in Sydney. Eyewitnesses recorded a hum resembling a trumpet from the sky. Some explain such cases by the wind, industrial facilities, acoustic effects, or editing. Others recall ancient texts where the sound of a trumpet is associated with a great warning. On a street in India, people froze when reddish-brown smoke suddenly billowed from under the ground. It looked as if strong heat broke through from below. No work was being carried out nearby, and viewers started talking about underground fire and even about a door to hell. Later, workers checked this place, and the ground, according to locals, remained unusually warm for some time. The reasons could be quite prosaic. Underground communications, a chemical reaction, smoldering materials. But in person, it looks different. When the street itself starts to smoke, the city suddenly seems like a thin crust over an unknown depth. At about 3 o'clock in the morning, a man from Dortmund walked out of his house and saw a golden, glowing shape in the sky. Small flashes flickered inside it, as if the glow was alive. He started filming, and the video quickly spread across the internet. Someone compared it to atmospheric optics, someone to a celestial sign, and someone honestly admitted that they would not have been able to calmly look at such a thing alone. Nighttime shooting always amplifies the effect. The city sleeps, the streets are empty, and suddenly over the roof appears something that does not fit into the familiar picture of the world. In Florida, a man was walking home at sunset and noticed a bright, round object above the sun. At first he thought it was the moon, but the real moon was in a completely different direction. Then versions appeared about Venus, Jupiter, a glare, an optical effect, or a reflection in the camera. But for the eyewitness, another thing was more important. An extra object appeared in the familiar picture of the sunset. Such moments break the automatism of perception. You look at the sky every day and are sure that you know where the sun, where the moon, and where the planets should be. And then a dot appears that seemingly did not ask for permission to be there. On a beach in Phuket, an eyewitness noticed in the water a giant, foggy shape similar to a human foot, as if someone invisible lowered a leg onto the surface of the sea. The waves began to swirl strangely and recede, amplifying the impression. Later, the region was shaken by a strong earthquake, and viewers linked the footage to the ancient image of a messenger standing with one foot on the sea, the other on the ground. Perhaps it was a play of fog, waves, and perspective, but the coincidence with underground tremors made the story much more powerful. Sometimes an event becomes a sign not at the moment of filming, but after the world around it changes. A group of tourists was sailing on a boat when a long light stripe stretched across a clear sky. It stretched over the sea like a road or a bridge, inside of which thin clouds were visible. Several people noticed it at once, so it could not be written off as a personal illusion. This could be an airplane trail, a difference in humidity layers, a cloud band, or an optical effect. But visually it resembled a path opened right in the sky. In the myths of different peoples, there are images of celestial roads and bridges between worlds. Therefore, such footage acts almost instantly. Even understanding the physics of the atmosphere, a person still thinks, if this is a road, then who is supposed to walk on it? Near Mocha Island in Chile, a tourist took footage on which the surface of the ocean seemed to catch fire. The sea, which is supposed to extinguish flames, itself became its source. It looked almost wrong, like a violation of the law of the elements. One of the versions is a combustible gas like methane exiting from the bottom and igniting on the surface. The explanation sounds realistic, but the image does not become weaker from this. A burning ocean is a powerful symbol of an inverted world. And here one wants to ask, not a mystical, but a very human question. What is happening to the planet if even water on our footage starts to look like a warning? An airplane passenger over Russia noticed bright dots in the sky with trails of smoke. For several seconds, they moved almost in formation and then disappeared. Official versions in such cases speak of rocket tests, space debris, or fragments of technology. But to viewers, it seemed that the trajectory was too coordinated. It is curious how quickly a human divides reality into two versions, rational and fantastic. And the fantastic one often sounds emotionally more convincing. When politicians, religious organizations, and ancient prophecies end up in the same field, the attention of the world grows instantly. Conversations about the possible restoration of the Third Temple in Jerusalem touch upon one of the most sensitive points on the planet. For some, this is a sacred hope. For others, a dangerous political topic. In the context of signs of the end times, the story sounds particularly loud. Here it is no longer clouds and light, but religion, history, and geopolitics woven into a single knot. On one of the days, people saw an almost impossible picture. Fish began to pour from the sky. They hit cars, the ground, and roofs, and some were still moving, as if they had just been pulled from an invisible river above the city. The scientific version again leads to water spouts. A vortex is capable of lifting small fish from a body of water and transferring them a great distance. But even understanding this, the tongue refuses to call a fish rain ordinary weather. In Antarctica, there is a place where the ice looks as if it is bleeding. Bright red water flows over the white surface, creating an almost frightening contrast. The scientific explanation is surprising in itself. The red color is associated with iron in the salt water that comes out of a subglacial reservoir. Upon contact with the air, the iron oxidizes, and the stream looks like rust or blood. Even more unusual is that microscopic forms of life can exist in such an isolated environment. This is a rare case where the explanation does not destroy the mystery, but makes it deeper. In Oregon, a man was driving down a remote road and noticed flashes of light behind the clouds. They did not look like an ordinary thunderstorm. The light appeared in short impulses, as if something was moving inside the cloud layer and giving a signal. Weather versions include electrical discharges, reflections, and rare atmospheric effects. But to the eyewitness, it seemed that the flashes had a rhythm. And where there is rhythm, a person almost automatically looks for meaning. Perhaps it was simply nature. But the question remains beautiful and alarming. If the sky really sent us a message, would we be able to distinguish it from an ordinary lightning strike? A couple went out for a night walk and noticed a soft golden glow in the sky. When the camera zoomed in, fiery streams appeared inside the clouds, slowly dripping down and melting in the darkness. This could be a reflection, pyrotechnics, an atmospheric effect, or something related to aviation. But in the shot, everything looked as if the sky was melting and dropping drops of fire. Such videos do not scream of catastrophe. They are quiet, strange, and therefore especially alarming. In northern Israel, the attention of believers was drawn to a red heifer named Melody. In Jewish tradition, such an animal is associated with the ancient rite of purification and the theme of the future temple. Therefore, the news quickly went beyond the limits of one village. Some saw in this a possible sign of messianic times. Others reminded that religious requirements here are extremely strict. But the fact remains a fact. One animal became the reason for a conversation of the whole world about prophecies, history, and the future. Over Islamabad during a severe thunderstorm, a huge dark cloud arose. Lightning illuminated it from the inside, and the shape seemed so unusual that many started talking not about the weather, but about a heavenly sign. Meteorologists would call this a powerful cumulonimbus cloud with electrical discharges, and most likely they would be right. But when a black mass hangs in front of you and light flashes inside it, scientific words do not immediately soothe. A thunderstorm always reminds a person of the scale of nature. And if a cloud folds into a strange silhouette, it starts to look like a presence, even if it is just water, ice, and electricity. Residents of one neighborhood heard a loud, incomprehensible sound and went outside. In the sky, they saw a rectangular shape of light, similar to an open door. It held on for only a few seconds, and then disappeared. Skeptics will offer a reflection, a spotlight, a break in the clouds, a camera effect, or an artificial source. But it is the rectangular shape that makes the story particularly strange. We are still ready to accept circles, spots, and flashes, but a door in the sky looks far too deliberate. That is why eyewitnesses started talking about a portal, not because they knew the answer, but because the human language itself picks out this word when it sees a glowing passageway where it shouldn't be. In a small neighborhood of San Diego, part of the sky suddenly filled with deep green. The glow looked as if a huge light source had been turned on behind the clouds. Eyewitnesses filmed what was happening and admitted that they had never seen anything like it. Versions appeared on the internet about secret experiments, atmospheric tests, and even a connection with the European Organization for Nuclear Research, although there is no confirmation for these guesses. More earthly explanations are electrical discharges, transformers, city lighting, reflection from clouds, or camera features. On the 26th of March, 2026, according to the author of the video, in the area of Fairhope in Alabama, a man noticed an unusual object in a clear sky. At first, he thought it was a balloon, but upon magnification, the shape looked more like a small separate cloud that almost did not move. The video took off on TikTok, and commentators started talking about a door in the sky and remembered ancient lines about heavens rolling up like a scroll. Skeptics saw an ordinary cloud structure, smoke, an object at altitude, or a camera effect. But what makes the shot strange is its calmness. Nothing explodes, sparkles, or falls. Just a clear sky and a small anomaly, seemingly hovering where it shouldn't be. San Antonio ended up in the center of attention after reports of a strange object that crashed near a parking lot. Eyewitnesses spoke of a bright trail, white fire, and a crater at the crash site. To some, it was a meteorite or space debris. To others, a coincidence with biblical images of celestial bodies falling before great events. People were especially hooked by the marks in the shape of a symbol, allegedly left on the surface. Scientists are looking for a physical explanation, but the imagination works differently. If something falls from the sky, it very quickly turns into a warning. In Fujian province, a local resident noticed a strange glowing ring in the sky. It hung motionless, did not look like a cloud, and quickly got the nickname Chinese portal on the internet. Scientists might explain such a shape by a smoke ring, illumination, or the trace of some event on the ground. But eyewitnesses insisted it looked too even and too alien. There is an almost cinematic effect in this. A dark or light ring over a city immediately gives birth to the thought of a passageway. We are so used to the language of science fiction that sometimes the real sky starts speaking to us with its exact images. A traveler in a remote area noticed that the sun filled with a deep red color, and a glowing ring arose around it. In itself, such a thing can be linked to dust, smoke, humidity, or atmospheric scattering. But then, according to eyewitnesses, low sounds resembling trumpets resounded in the sky. And here an ordinary sunset turns into an event with a religious overtone. A red sun, a circle of light, a hum in the sky. all this folds too easily into the image of a warning. What catches the most in such stories is not even mysticism, but how quickly nature knows how to make a human feel small. In York, cyclists noticed long convex lines on the path that appeared as if suddenly. In dry weather, they seemed harmless, but in the dark or after rain, they became almost invisible and dangerous. Some people fell running their wheels over them. This is not a heavenly sign and not a mystical portal, but exactly such details show that the strange can be very close on your ordinary route. Sometimes what frightens is not the grandiosity of a phenomenon, but its incomprehensible origin. The road you drove on every day suddenly changes and starts to act like a trap. In Haryana, India, people were standing by a river when a large section of the surface suddenly lifted out of the water. For a few seconds, it seemed as if something was pushing up from below and a huge creature was about to appear. Possible explanations include underground pressure, movement of gas, shifting of soil, or the floating of a soil section saturated with water. But for eyewitnesses, it was a real moment of waiting. The water trembles, the earth rises, everyone looks and does not know what will happen next. On Lake Baikal, people filmed how a huge ice sheet began to slowly crawl onto the shore. Thick blocks cracked, climbed over each other, and advanced forward with a crunch. This known natural phenomenon can be linked to the wind, currents, thermal expansion, and the movement of ice. But it looks as if the lake is waking up and pushing out its frozen armor. Lake Baikal is already perceived almost mystically, the deepest lake, ancient water, endless ice. Therefore, the shot with the advancing ice seems not just beautiful, but alive. During a severe thunderstorm in Georgia, a student was filming flashes from a dormitory balcony. At some point, lightning struck exactly the pointed top of a building or tower, and the whole structure flared up for a fraction of a second. Physics explains this simply. High and sharp objects really do more often become points of discharge, but the video looked so precise, as if the sky had deliberately chosen a target. It is exactly such shots that perfectly conclude such a story. Almost any phenomenon can be explained, verified, and broken down into causes. But while a human looks at a flash cutting through the night sky, an ancient feeling still wakes up inside. Perhaps the world is much more mysterious than we are used to thinking. By a shopping center, people noticed how clouds began to gather into a dark spinning spot. At first, it resembled the birth of a tornado, but then the shape became like a hole or a funnel in the sky. Eyewitnesses called it a black hole, a portal, and a stargate. Meteorologists usually look in such cases for signs of a vortex, instability of the air, or unusual cloud cover. But the crowd in the parking lot sees neither graphs nor pressure maps. It sees a hole overhead. And when the sky looks as if a wound has appeared in it, explanations start to sound already after the fear. After a mass in Naga City in the Philippines, believers saw a white, elongated shape in the clouds. To many, it reminded them of the figure of Jesus with spread arms and long strands resembling hair. The video quickly dispersed because the moment happened next to a religious event among thousands of people who came to pray. A skeptic will say that clouds often take on familiar outlines, and will be right. But for those who stood there with a candle in their hands, this was not an exercise in pattern recognition. This was a personal experience in which the sky became part of a prayer. A YouTube content creator was driving down a remote road in a Siberian forest and filming the landscape when a large glowing sphere appeared between the trees. It stayed low, almost at the very ground, did not make a sound, and for a few seconds seemed to just watch. Then the recording cut off, which only amplified the effect. Perhaps it was an object on the road, a reflection, a light source, editing, or a rare natural phenomenon. But the forest adds a special atmosphere to such footage. In the city, we look for wires, streetlights, and signs. In the deep taiga, any light seems alien, because it supposedly has nowhere to come from. People flying in a helicopter near Vancouver noticed a damaged metallic object in the river. It did not look like a boat, nor an airplane, nor ordinary garbage. It seemed as if something heavy collapsed from a height and stayed lying in plain sight. If this is military equipment, why wasn't it removed immediately? And if it is not a human apparatus, what could have shot it down right over the river? And the longer you look at the water, the stronger it seems that the river simply did not have time to hide a stranger's secret. At about 2 o'clock in the morning, a dog woke up its owner and dragged him to the backyard. On the patio, he saw cracked concrete and a stone in the center of a small crater. Later, the man said that the stone reacted to a magnet, and such a thing is not simply found on the road. Everything looked as if a small meteorite pierced the night sky and crashed right into his yard. Lucky it wasn't the roof. The night ended, but the question remained lying in the concrete, along with that very stone. In a Mexican town, people filmed how police officers lead a strange creature down the road. It resembled a human, but instead of an ordinary face, there was an elongated beak, and on the sides hung gray strands, similar to feathers. It moved slowly as if it was wounded. Some decided that this was an escape from a secret laboratory. Others, that a creature fell into the town, about which the authorities knew more than they said. The crowd made noise, but on the recording, the main thing is felt. No one nearby understood who exactly they were escorting. In December of the year 2019 on the Isle of Anglesey in Wales, they found hundreds of dead starlings. From afar, it seemed that the birds were feeding by the roadside, but they were not moving. Authorities collected some of the birds for analysis and considered various causes, from poisoning to a sharp collision of the flock with the ground. What is frightening is not only the death of the animals, but that everything happened almost simultaneously, as if for a second, the very order of nature broke down. Birds are the first to feel what humans notice too late. In China in the year 2017, streets turned out to be strewn with fish. People walked past cars and saw dozens of sea creatures on the asphalt, as if they had been dropped from above. At first, they started talking about prophecies and disasters, but the explanation turned out to be earthly. The area was located near the sea, and severe bad weather could well have transferred the fish to land. And yet imagine a morning when instead of puddles, there is a fish lying on the road. Such a thing is hard to forget. Even a plausible explanation does not cancel the feeling, as if the city found itself inside a strange dream for a minute. A farmer from a small town claimed that he filmed a figure in long garments, slowly descending from the sky. On the video, neither a parachute nor a cable, nor an apparatus is visible, only a silhouette smoothly going down. The author himself called what he saw divine, and some residents started talking about the return of Jesus. Skeptics looked for an explanation in optics and editing, but the movement of the figure was so calm that the argument never ended. When a person sees such a thing over their own field, they are already telling not a story, but a confession. In the south of India, someone raised their eyes and noticed a silhouette balancing on the roof of a house. And then the figure stepped into the void, opened enormous wings, and went upwards. In the outlines, a half-human, half-bird could be read, and viewers immediately dubbed it Garuda, a winged deity from Indian myths. Skeptics nod at editing, believers at a message from the heavens. But agree, it is one thing to meet a legend within the walls of a temple, and quite another above the roof of a residential block. Ancient tales live so long precisely because the world, time and again, slips them scenery. Rumors about lost knowledge and guests from space have always swarmed around the pyramids. So the video with a beam of light instantly blew up the feeds. A tourist was simply catching the sunset with a camera when a pillar of light descended from the sky and accurately laid upon the top of the pyramid. Some started talking about a rare refraction in the atmosphere, others about scanning or pumping energy. What was confusing was how methodically the beam groped for its target. Near 1,000-year-old stones, even an ordinary glow acquires a second bottom, and a short flash of light over ancient slabs reads like someone's message, except the addressee is unknown to us. A street camera in Mexico caught a creepy shot. A giant flock of black birds simultaneously crashed onto the pavement. It looked like a dark storm cloud that lost its shape and smashed against the ground. Some of the birds immediately soared back up, but dozens remained lying there. Experts later suggested The flock was fleeing from a predator and failed to manage the maneuver. Sounds logical, but it is still uneasy to watch. The living sky for a moment turned into a black downpour. On a road in Saudi Arabia, drivers got stuck in the middle of a scene both ridiculous and frightening. Chickens poured from the sky. Cars slowed down. People did not understand what was happening at all. Later, specialists put forward a version that a powerful stream of wind picked up the birds, dragged them through the air, and then exhausted itself. Sounds almost like an anecdote, until you imagine yourself behind the wheel. Rain, snow, hail, that fits in the head. But a chicken flying into the windshield breaks the picture of the world in a fraction of a second. It is funny exactly until the moment you imagine the actual impact on the glass. A resident of Kansas City filmed a creature similar to a huge moth. Some saw an ordinary insect in an unusual perspective. Others remembered the Mothman, a winged legend that is associated with disasters. The video gives neither a clear scale nor a 100% answer. This is the strength of such footage. They do not convince completely, but they do not let themselves be forgotten either. Either this is just a moth, or the night again pretended to be ordinary. Researchers in the jungle claimed that they found a tiny humanoid body with transparent wings. It looked like a fairy from fairy tales, except it lay in front of the camera as a real find. The authors assured that later they caught another creature alive, but did not show convincing evidence. Some laugh at the fake, others ask, why must all legends necessarily be an invention? Fairy tales become darker when they are suddenly found on the ground. In Zhengzhou, people saw how blue lights began to fall from the sky. The crowd scattered in different directions. In the first seconds, it resembled the beginning of an invasion. Later, it turned out that during a drone show, a glitch occurred. The machines lost formation and poured down. No one was seriously injured, but the footage still looks alarming. The brain does not immediately parse the word drone. It sees lights falling from the sky and orders to run. A beautiful show in seconds turned into a lesson. Technologies also know how to fall from the sky like an anomaly. In the port of Halifax, workers saw glowing forms descending from the clouds. They had flat tops and long funnel-shaped rays that touched the water. Where the rays hit the sea, the surface began to bubble, as if something invisible was pressing on it. The observation lasted for almost 10 minutes. Then the lights disappeared. If light is capable of moving water, this is no longer just a beautiful phenomenon. This is a physical mystery. If nature is in front of us, it looked too technical. If technology, too ghostly. During a hike through a Russian forest, a man stumbled upon a huge white sphere among crushed vegetation. There were no hatches, no inscriptions, no seams, no doors on it. When struck, it sounded hollow, but it could not be moved. The grass around was crumpled as if the object really fell from above. It did not resemble a satellite nor a tank, but it did not look natural either. A perfect white sphere in a forest is too simple a shape for such a complex mystery. Any reasonable version crashes against a simple detail. The sphere too perfectly did not belong to this place. In Germany, a tourist noticed a large winged creature between the trunks. At first, he took it for an eagle, but the silhouette stubbornly fit not a bird, but a griffin from old tales. After publication, some of the locals suddenly recalled their own strange encounters in the mountains. Maybe just an unfortunate angle. Or maybe ancient creatures haven't gone anywhere. They just learned not to catch the eye. A forest looks deserted exactly until the moment it decides to reveal itself. A man filmed a charred pit on his plot and took out a light stone from there, still smoking with wisps. Viewers advised, do not touch, call specialists, or better yet, push it to collectors. Jokes about superpowers poured in immediately, but the situation is entertaining even without them. A meteorite means it could be worth money, not a meteorite. Even more interesting, what kind of rock burned through the soil and continued to smolder while already lying on the ground? An American worker filmed a jelly-like substance, which, according to him, fell from the sky, crawled a bit across the asphalt, and partially evaporated. A slimy puddle remained on the ground, similar not to water, but to something biological. On the internet, they remembered chemical sprayings, experiments, and old stories about heavenly jelly. Sometimes a mystery does not fall with a crash. Sometimes it quietly plops onto the road and disappears, while everyone argues whether it can be touched. Exactly such substances give birth to the most unpleasant question. Is this just dirt or something that is better not inhaled? On the 16th of July, 2019, not far from Melbourne, a man noticed jelly-like pieces falling from the sky. Upon impact, they seemed to melt and release water, but it did not look like ice. Similar stories were also remembered in the United States of America, where after rain, streets and roofs were covered by a slimy mass, and some people complained of feeling unwell. Analyses did not give a simple answer. The more such cases there are, the stranger the familiar phrase, "it will rain," sounds. After such stories, the word precipitation starts to sound suspiciously broad. In the discussed video, a humanoid figure descends from the sky and lands on the roof of a church. In its hands, it holds an object, then lets it go. But the thing does not fall. It hovers and slowly rises back. Skeptics immediately talk about editing, and this is possible. But the place, the movement, and the hovering object itself create too strong an image. A church, the sky, an unknown figure. Sometimes symbols frighten no worse than evidence. You can doubt as much as you want, but the image is already cut into the memory. In Thailand, a dashboard camera filmed how a large object suddenly falls from the sky right in front of an automobile and misses by literally a few meters. It was rounded and heavy, not like an ordinary stone. There were no cliffs or buildings around from which it could have fallen. Therefore, viewers started talking about a fragment of an unidentified flying object, or a part of an unknown apparatus. An official answer never sounded, and in such cases, silence only spurs the imagination. A second earlier or later, and this video could have ended completely differently. Near Jaipur, farmers fished out a small sphere from a soggy field. In size, a trifle, but in weight, if you believe the eyewitnesses, unliftable. The owner of the plot swore that the contraption fell right from the cloud-covered sky and imprinted itself into the mud. It does not pass for a cobblestone, nor for a full-fledged apparatus. More likely a fragment of something large. The question remains, large? What? A trifle sometimes catches more terror than a colossus. After all, it is like a spare part from a mechanism that is still turning somewhere. On the 11th of April, 2025, in the Indonesian Pondok Betawi, a dark blotch plopped into a rice field, whether a cloud of smoke or pitch or living black flesh. The internet, without thinking twice, dubbed it Venom's Egg. The video scattered instantly, but no serious investigation ever followed. Some interpreted it as natural precipitation, others as something overtly otherworldly. But what is alarming in this story is its own scenario. It flared up and almost immediately dissolved. If it was an ordinary mass, it decided to appear far too spectacularly. A Texan returned from vacation and discovered a black crater on his property. The earth is charred, and right in the center lurked a stone. A neighbor swore that a couple of days ago he saw with his own eyes how a meteor fell from the sky. The network vyingly advised, do not paw it with your hands, check for radiation, take it to scientists. Maybe it really is an ordinary shard of space that accidentally chose exactly this lawn. But once a crater yawns in the yard, you can no longer call the day ordinary. The universe rarely knocks delicately. Sometimes it simply leaves its black signature on the lawn. In the Chinese province of Shanxi, an outlandish bird was spotted on a pole. Everything was seen in it at once, both a peacock and a predator, and a character from an ancient fresco. The crowd quickly delivered a verdict. Feng Huang, the Chinese phoenix, an emblem of purity and well-being. It is not excluded that an ordinary rare bird with magnificent plumage simply sat in front of the people, but eyewitnesses preferred to see a good sign. It happens that a legend does not instill fear at all, but quietly grants hope. A person was feeding pigeons, and one of them suddenly seemed strange to him. Approaching closer, he made out something similar to circuit boards and wires in the tail. The bird looked like a robot dressed up as an ordinary city pigeon. The network instantly produced versions about surveillance and spy micro-drones. Maybe it really is a toy or a broken mechanism. But the little thought remains unpleasant. What if we are being watched, not only by cameras on lampposts? Now, any pigeon on a wire seems slightly less harmless than a second ago. On a Chinese farm, they found a huge ice sphere that smashed through a net over a greenhouse. The farmer did not understand where it could even have come from. There were no suitable conditions for such a block nearby. Such falls are sometimes linked to the atmosphere or airplanes, but the size is still frightening. This is not a hailstone, but a real ice projectile. Had it fallen on a car or a person, the story would have turned out completely different. In Colombia, eyewitnesses saw a perfectly round metallic sphere without wings, seams, and an engine. It moved confidently, snagged high-voltage wires, and fell. Later, a group of specialists arrived at the site, and the object was dubbed the Sphere of Buga. They said that it is cold, smooth, and covered with strange symbols. If this is human technology, it looks too unusual. If not human, who left such a neat mark on the Earth? Too smooth, too cold, too silent. This is exactly how objects that do not want to explain themselves look. A twilight beach, a man with a camera, and over the water, a glowing sphere lights up. It swam up to the person at the edge of the surf, froze, and in the next moment, he detached from the sand. A fraction of a second, and the sphere, along with the person, went upwards, dissolving in the sky. The versions are predictable. For some, it is editing. For others, a classic abduction by aliens. But what catches here is not the graphics, but the chill from the thought that the lens caught what it was not supposed to see. A video rolled across the internet from which it is hard to look away. A dense stream of water lashed from the sky into the sea, as if a giant faucet had burst open somewhere above. Neither an airplane, nor a pipe, nor a hint of a source. Simply a flow collapsing from a dark cloud straight into the waves. Someone mumbled about pressure drops and condensation. Someone confidently diagnosed it as a portal. And even if the atmosphere finds its own explanations, the picture stubbornly insists, the sky sprang a leak. Nature first shows a trick, and science only then, stumbling, looks for formulations for it. A driver accidentally turned onto a long closed road and noticed a creature similar to a bat up ahead. When it got closer to the car, the camera snatched a silhouette that looked far more terrifying than an ordinary animal. On the internet, it was compared to Camazotz, a dark-winged creature from Maya myths. After the video, the road started being called cursed. There are places where it is better not to drive, especially if the darkness there looks at you with wings. After such a turn, you no longer trust the navigator so unconditionally. In India, eyewitnesses encountered a nightmare that is hard to imagine calmly. Snakes began to fall from the sky. People scattered, covered their heads, and did not understand where they were coming from. There were no trees nearby, nor a truck that could explain everything. Locals started talking about a sign from above and a warning. And even if nature has an answer, when a snake falls in front of you onto the ground, science is remembered far from first. This is the case when you want to close the windows, even if you are just watching a video on a phone. Off the coast of Islamorada, a fishing vessel came across dozens of turkey vultures, falling into the water and trying not to drown. The captain and passengers started pulling the birds out with nets. Experts talked about wind, heat, exhaustion, and sharp ecological factors. But versions appeared on the internet about an anomalous zone and even an underwater base. Whatever the reason, seeing how the sky drops large birds into the sea is unpleasant on the level of instinct. A man was walking through the forest and noticed a creature similar to an owl. But when he raised his camera, he saw dark red, almost human eyes, almost human legs, and huge bird claws. He got scared and ran away. On the internet, they remembered the owlman and the mothman, legendary winged harbingers of misfortune. The most frightening thing in the shot is not an attack. The creature just stands and looks. Sometimes a motionless gaze in the forest frightens stronger than any scream. On the 15th of April, 2025, in Magnolia, state of New Jersey, a crash thundered and a flash illuminated the sky. In the morning, an auto repair shop owner discovered a hole in the roof and damage inside, including dents on sturdy equipment. Cameras recorded both the flash and the moment of impact. Astronomers said that there are signs of a fall, but a fragment was never found. A hole is there, a crash is there, a flash is there, but the object seemingly evaporated. In the year 2015, in the Texan Eisenhower State Park, creepy lumps of living worms the size of a tennis ball were discovered right on the road. From the outside, it seemed as if they had tumbled from the sky and were now swarming on the asphalt. Biologists reduced everything to torrential rains. The worms crawled out and huddled into dense tangles. But even knowing the solution, watching a squirming living ball is still sickening. After a storm in China, a man found a small octopus on the windshield of his car. A very real one, not rubber. This really does happen. A strong wind or a waterspout snatches up small marine life and drops it onto land. There is an explanation, but it doesn't make things any easier. Just imagine, you turn on the wipers after the rain, and an octopus is crawling across the glass. The ocean sometimes sends packages, forgetting to indicate the recipient. In Williamston, state of South Carolina, a bright meteor flew into a person's yard. At the point of impact, he picked up an unusual blue stone. According to him, it was icy to the touch and quietly glowed, as if a charge was still warming inside. The network immediately buzzed. A rare mineral, extraterrestrial substance, the strangest lawn ornament in the world. The majority of people in their entire lives have never once held a piece of the sky in their hands. But for this one, it flew right into the yard itself. A blue light in the palm sounds poetic, but next to a smoking crater, it no longer passes for an ornament. Somewhere in a deserted wilderness, a tourist raised his head and saw a figure with gigantic wings in the sky. At first he thought, a bird, but the silhouette increasingly filled with human features, surrounded by an even glow. The author intentionally did not name the filming location, dropping that the encounter was deeply personal, almost sacred. Skeptics will brush it off. A costume, a drone, editing, an optical trick. But for the witness himself, it was a moment that needs no excuses. Sometimes the sky hands you not proof, but a feeling. For some, it is just a video, and for someone, a day after which the sky no longer seems empty. A remote village late at night, and suddenly, a roar that makes the windows shudder. By morning, one of the locals wandered in a field upon a colossal object, sunk up to its middle in the soil. And here the most uncomfortable part begins. People in hermetic suits were already crowding around the find, and on the ground outlines could be guessed, suspiciously similar to the bodies of incomprehensible creatures. As soon as the cameraman took a step forward, he was roughly shoved away. Someone brands the video a staged setup. Someone whispers about a leak. But the air in these frames literally rings with anxiety. A strike, chemical protection, bodies, a ban on filming. A set too dense for the viewer to indifferently scroll past. The Liaoning province presented the world with perhaps the most disgusting variety of rain. Worms poured down from the sky. They plopped onto hoods, stuck to shop windows and sidewalks, and people had to open umbrellas not from water, but from a living mass. All sorts of explanations circulated, from squally wind to an inexplicable whim of nature. But eyewitnesses had no time for theories. The sky suddenly turned into a source of something slippery, wet, and squirming. There are rains that are pleasant to sit out by the window, and there are those under which you wouldn't poke your head even for a millionth view. Near Tampa, several cameras at once recorded the same thing. Birds are tumbling from the sky. One eyewitness was filming right from the board of a cruise liner. The feathered ones plummeted down right above the water. A coherent reason was never found, and the imagination of the viewers raced from the weather to magnetic anomalies, secret experiments, and biblical signs. When birds suddenly stop holding onto the sky and begin to fall, it looks like a glitch in the very mechanics of nature. The explanation might be banal, but the first impression is not. They fall silently, and from the silence, the anxiety only grows. In Denver, a driver filmed strange junk on the road. Not a dented passenger car, but rather the hull of some small apparatus that crashed right within the city limits on the 19th of April, 2025. Police and rescuers drove up, but eyewitnesses did not spot any stirring inside. Later, the object was allegedly dubbed a drone, and a highly sophisticated one at that. And here's the catch. If a drone, then whose? And if not a drone, why was it so hastily written down as a drone? In November of the year 2025, a resident of Japan filmed a bright object rapidly falling with a smoky trail. At first, it was taken for a meteor, but upon magnification, it looked not like a stone, but like a blazing clot of plasma, almost a small sun. On the internet, people started talking about an artificial luminary, secret tests, and unknown technology. An ordinary meteor should not raise so many questions, but this one did. Sometimes one flash in the sky does more for theories than 100 nighttime tales. Somewhere in the United States of America, a massive object resembling a giant church bell ended up on a highway. But there was no temple, no accident, and no understandable transport nearby. It had no wings, no cabin, no engines, and yet people called it an unidentified flying object because another category simply could not be found. Soon the area was blocked off. If this is just garbage, why such haste? If an apparatus, then whose is it? The simpler the shape, the harder it is to believe that it accidentally ended up in the middle of the highway. A villager posted a short recording where a winged beast moves across the sky. And it flies not in a bird-like manner, in jerks, as if the silhouette is pulled by invisible threads. Some wrote it off as a rare species or lens distortion. Others saw a cryptid and the most impressionable remembered pterodactyls. The insidiousness of short videos consists exactly of this. They prove nothing, but they stoke the imagination to the fullest, especially when the frame cuts off at the most interesting point. In Japan, passers-by crowded around a shiny contraption that collapsed right on the roadway, large, smooth, whimsically curved, as if a child's sketch of a flying saucer suddenly gained flesh. No portholes, no passengers, not a single understandable detail. Looks like an apparatus that lost control and crashed as is. Sometimes an empty shell unnerves stronger than a living monster. After all, it is unclear who has already climbed out of it. Nothing threatening was happening around, but the unknown itself frightened more reliably than any horror. We already have a good tradition to shove into compilations cars suspended in trees, who knows how. How it happened, we have no idea. But the prize for the most creative parking of the year definitely goes to the owner of this car. He even sacrificed it for the reward. If the fry and the egg do not separate, a two-headed fish is born. I'm not sure that it is comfortable for this little one to swim in such a format, but the two-in-one effect would perfectly suit a commercial. You will ask, what's the big deal here? Cars darting back and forth, no big deal. And now look closely. There is no one behind the wheel. Automation here is twisted up to some cosmic level. Maximum transport and not a single hitch. On one of the Indonesian islands, a regular frog invasion broke out. It is a pity that not in France. There, perhaps, they would only lick their lips. And local residents are left to look under their feet and wade through a slippery, croaking cloud to the accompaniment of a million-strong choir. A hurricane in California laid siege to an entire student campus. Those who found themselves in its trap were left only to shoot videos and admit that they seemingly found themselves inside a movie with computer graphics. I think they were still glad that they were stuck on campus and not in a tent campsite. Before us is the queen of the fields, or rather even the king, Her Majesty corn. This is what genetic engineering does in agriculture. True, then everything will have to be scaled, including the harvesting machinery. And frankly speaking, dragging such a heavy cob from the vegetable stall home seems a dubious pleasure to me, Nummer eins. These birds are builders from God. Wielding only twigs, they erected multi-story houses and now bliss out in spacious, reliable apartments. A huge pod of dolphins is a breathtaking spectacle, but to find myself in their path, say, on an inflatable boat, I would not wish. Admiring them is much more pleasant from a bird's eye view. A solar eclipse is not rain that can pour whenever it pleases. And if such a thing suddenly happens suddenly and swiftly, contrary to all astronomical calculations, willy-nilly, you will wonder, do we really know celestial mechanics that well? The people, of course, took it as a free performance, but I would be anxious. Will the luminary return to us? The crab said it. The crab did it. On the route of crab migration, obstacles simply do not exist. If need be, they will pass even through your bedroom without blinking. Of course, this is not an epochal collision of tectonic plates, but it looks no less powerful, especially if a neighboring piece of land suddenly glued itself to your ditch. Well, consider that nature itself ordered it so, and don't judge severely. Stripes stretched in the sky, exactly like from a passing airplane. The only trouble is that no one was flying over those mountains at that moment. So, who left them? What will be the assumptions? Notice something like this. Stay away and immediately call emergency services. And generally, any incomprehensible phenomenon, whether anthropogenic or natural, is most likely dangerous. Norwegian winter knows how to paint incredible pictures. The ice mosaic looks like turquoise set in white metal, and the frozen body of water like the window of a jewelry boutique. A surprise awaited the fishermen from a Philippine village in the morning. And what a surprise! It seemed as if the sea had cooked itself a fish porridge, and going out into open waters became an absolutely pointless activity. It is almost unrealistic to resist the temptation to take a ride on the ice. And how pleasant it is to listen to the pieces of ice ringing, sliding on the smooth surface. At the same time, you'll check if a treacherous polynya is lurking ahead. Flew far means the ice is even and strong. The mountain climber fancied himself the most desperate extreme sports lover, exactly until a competitor appeared in the frame. A pilot in a Batman suit triumphantly swept over him and rewrote the record. There will always be someone cooler who soars higher than you. No, this is not a crater from a meteorite, and not a trace from a shell. Before you is a karst sinkhole, a sudden deep collapse of soil that unexpectedly opens up right in an open field. Underground erosion is to blame. Underground water becomes saturated with carbon dioxide and slowly undermines the foundation. Street art in general is famous for its dash. Here, for example, how do you like such an installation? It puts you in a stupor, that is for sure. Personally, I don't have the slightest guess as to why it is here. In Lima, the capital of Peru, one of the rivers also turned red for no reason at all. What exactly happened and what it threatens the ecosystem and people with has yet to be found out. What if there is some unkind sign hidden here too? And this is what autumn weather looks like in Iceland, a real test of endurance for any tourist. It is curious to experience on yourself the wind that does not just knock you off your feet, but seems seriously intent on carrying you away with it. It seems to me if this is some kind of delicacy, then they are indeed very lucky. I myself, shoot me, don't understand what it is, a plant, a beast, or newborn dragons. Tell me if you're in the loop, but I would not eat this under any sauce. Birds of prey harbor a weakness for high-rises. Stumbling upon such a thing on the balcony of a skyscraper is a rather unexpected sight. On the bright side, mice will definitely not appear in your apartment now. Off the coast of Australia, fishermen caught something vaguely resembling mermaids. The mysterious creature calmly swam right in front of the cameras, but there is no mysticism here at all. In reality, it is just an unusual representative of the octopus family, whose relatives from time to time pop up in the warm waters of Oceania. Another unidentified object surrounded by a blue halo showed up in the night sky. Where it came from, no one could articulately explain, and it looks like a colossal gas burner. That which crawls also jumps and sometimes takes off. In Australia, this is the order of things. Here are, for example, multifunctional reptiles. Good thing they don't fly, but they jump far and surprisingly briskly. This is what Siberian everyday life looks like. Russians perhaps cannot be surprised by these colors. After all, they have 9 months of winter a year. But here, a snowstorm creeps up on us, which is about to wrap even this unwelcoming landscape in its blanket. What does it look like? Like thousands of butterflies stuck to the thorns all at once. But really, have you ever met such stunningly beautiful cacti, nummer-eins? Well, and how after this not to believe in an unidentified flying object? What is this thing anyway? A flying triangle painted with lights. Somehow I do not recall airplanes of such a model. If you ever came across a pigeon of such coloring, you probably decided that kids played a joke on it. But no, the color is absolutely natural, although completely atypical for urban birds. Do you consider chickens empty and unfeeling creatures? But in vain. It turns out that they experience emotions and are not averse to comforting someone who has lost heart. Maybe the best petting zoo will not be an apiary at all, but a chicken farm? Many, yawning, brushed it off, saying, "Another recording of the Northern Lights." The only thing is, the video was filmed in Africa, and this turns everything upside down. We haven't observed the Southern Lights yet. The sun behaves as if it is examining itself in a mirror or brought its own double to a luminary contest. People say, a thief's hat catches fire, and so one of the mountains in Azerbaijan blazed due to a leak of natural gas. It turns out, the proverb did not fail here either. A curious apparatus. Such a prickly dome slides on the water by itself without a single movement and sound. It is a mystery how it even stays afloat. Perhaps it is some kind of data collector for meteorologists or for monitoring the environmental situation. Looking at this horned snake, you begin to believe in dragons seriously. They're just a little bit larger. Fireflies are fantastic natural decoration not only for meadows and fields, but also an exceptionally authentic copy of the starry sky. If you have seen at least once how thousands of fireflies flicker in the crowns of trees, you will fall in love with these living garlands, stronger than any New Year's tree. And again, one of those places where nature did the work for a whole brigade of sculptors. It is hard to believe that this is a random rock formation and not an idol hewn by someone. I'd bet in immemorial times people flocked here for rituals. They assure that ice is a viscoelastic body. You can't argue with elasticity, but viscosity somehow doesn't quite fit in the head. And yet, even though it shatters like glass, it surprisingly preserves the pattern of a solid canvas. What if extraterrestrial life looks exactly like this? Wandering blue sparks, and not classic little green men. Judging by how feverishly they dart around, they have enough to do. Or is it just electronics acting up? Honestly, without your collective mind, I can't figure this out. You will surely decide that the sandy river flows somewhere in Saudi Arabia, but under the blanket of the finest grains of sand hides real water. This is what a flash flood looks like. The current picked up sandy masses and carried them away, not letting them settle and dissolve. The glow of jellyfish is a spectacle worth diving 10 meters for. Just look. One tiny jellyfish is capable of illuminating a whole underwater cave, no worse than the magic lamp from the fairy tale about Aladdin. Cohesion and synchronicity in the wild hint that animals are organized much more sensibly than human society. If only we could adopt at least a drop of such solidarity. A turtle is slow only in appearance. Its reaction can be lightning fast. They know how to both bite and hiss. Any living creature will use everything just to defend itself. You will not meet these fish often, but in Asia, eyewitnesses were lucky to film an entire migrating school. Are you also seeing something like this for the first time in your life? If a mirage manages to arise in the middle of a desert, what prevents it from surfacing in the middle of a city? Flooded with sunset light, some fantastic palace hovered in the sky, as if transferred here by hallucination from a neighboring city. The fabric does not just burn beautifully, It leaves behind a stunning ashen pattern. The only shame is that you won't be able to touch it. In essence, it is already a single memory. Where and when this fragment was filmed and how it all ended is a mystery. But in the frame, a transformed humanoid creature distinctly emerges. A massive tail, vampire features. It involuntarily pulls out of memory the legends of the chupacabra, that very elusive predator of American folklore that hunts livestock. Although, let's be honest, with a complete lack of data, this can easily turn out to be a prank or a clever setup. And again, the ground slips from under the feet. On the recording, allegedly made in the United States of America, the consequences of two unidentified flying object crashes at once somewhere in the desert are visible. People in the uniforms of special services seemingly study the cordoned-off wreckage for breakdowns in the presence of extraterrestrial guests. Look closely. The saucer made of a material resembling dark glass or hardened resin is dented here and there. Many viewers wrote the plot off as fakes. Officially, nothing of the sort was reported. And yet the spectacle, frankly speaking, is not rosy, and one day it is quite capable of migrating to a news broadcast. And here in China, eyewitnesses managed to film a very real phantom city. It hung at the level of the clouds and, down to the details, repeated the outlines of some real neighborhood, perhaps dragging its reflection over tens of kilometers. The effect has a name, Fata Morgana, and in essence, it is still the same mirage. Right over the state of Oregon, people made out an unidentified flying object lowering down a sheaf of light. The glow struck so powerfully that it flooded half the city, exactly as it was described in old science fiction. And here one involuntarily asks, where did the authors of those novels know about this many decades ago? The full moon is already shrouded in superstitions, but what about seeing 3 full moons at once? And this is not a halo at all. There's no glowing aura around it. Maybe nature has some even rarer optical illusions hidden in its reserve? In the first second, it seems that a mannequin's head fell off and is now rolling by itself along the street. But no, fortunately, it is just a child with an incredibly long and thick head of hair. With such a mane, he will always be a head more noticeable than his peers. Although, who knows? What if his mom is a hairdresser and they are growing raw material for sale? Such a thing would not even be dreamed of by Australians. In Malaysia, an insane invasion of insects broke out. Everything around was drawn tight with cobwebs and a continuous crawling cover. Now, who I definitely do not envy, is the author of the video, who landed in the very epicenter. I really hope that this is a projection from a spotlight and not an unidentified flying object choosing a landing spot nearby. Although, if you look into it, why shouldn't a flying saucer have more powerful spotlights? Time to play Believe It or Not. Rumor has it that certain plants emit highly flammable gas. What do you think? An invention or the pure truth? Share your versions in the comments. Approximately, this is how the beginning of the apocalypse looks in our fantasies. And the matter is not even the monstrous number of birds and not these alarming, exhausting sounds, but the very meaning of their gathering. This rally clearly has some goal. Such behavior of birds is considered extremely atypical, and usually it precedes natural cataclysms. Look, their tossing about resembles a general panic, as if they are jointly deciding where to quickly rush off with the whole flock. Really, people ought to catch the signals that animals give more attentively. They certainly won't worry for nothing. In the warm season, fireflies can be found literally at every step, near the water, on forest edges, right in the grass. During the day, you wouldn't tell them apart from ordinary bugs for anything, but toward evening, they turn the familiar terrain into a fairy tale, which you can admire all night long. These gases are fit to fuel a launch vehicle, and they went and burst out right on the roadway. It's a good thing, fortunately. No one was driving on it at that minute. A resident of Vermont was brushing snow off his car and suddenly noticed that tiny rainbow stains remain on the glass after the brush. Where would they come from in ordinary meltwater? Maybe the snow was mixed with acid, or maybe a gasoline film was brought straight from the street air. It is enough simply to strike this stone, and it strikes a flame. You can easily light a cigarette this way, managing without a lighter. 1-, a bit heavy for the pocket. With the first rays of the sun, thick steam begins to swirl around the trunk of a sequoia. It melts the ice and snow, imperceptibly wakes up the tree, and helps it shake the icy shackles off its branches. It is simply amazing how cohesively ants can act. Perhaps only those acrobats or electricians are capable of competing with them. And this is how people treat the environment in some countries. Rivers of garbage threaten to flood the planet, exactly as The Simpsons prophesied in one of the cult episodes. And all this is coming true, however sad it is. Can anyone explain this? The last leaf clings to the top, like a drowning man throwing up his arm. Maybe the tree is trying to signal to us that it needs help? An enormous ring of fire arose seemingly from nowhere in the sky over Colorado. By the way, the biblical expression fiery Gehenna is an image of inextinguishable flame that instills awe in anticipation of Judgment Day. And again, a setup. Fishermen in Indonesia fished out one of the most outlandish creatures. Do you seriously believe that they caught it with their bare hands? Personally, after such an adventure, I would change my trade. I would go to be an electrician. There are more than enough legends about sea monsters of the past. In this footage, allegedly filmed during a deep-water dive, a creature similar to the mythical Leviathan emerges. The biblical giant serpent from the Old Testament, true, was multi-headed, but who can vouch? To write it down in myths or still recognize it as real? Right before the eyes of amazed eyewitnesses, a rainbow turned into lightning. How is this even possible? A coincidence or a clever edit? Have you ever seen something like this? In Indonesia, in the middle of the open sea, a strange blue glow flared up. It blazed quite brightly, and the only thing that can be known for sure is that these are definitely not flashes of glowing plankton. Meet the sea goats. Eccentric deepwater creatures whose bodies look almost like skeletons and do not smack of goat habits at all. But since seahorses exist underwater, why shouldn't other hoofed animals appear? How very amusing they are. The mother bird, it seems, has seriously aimed to break the record for the number of chicks. Or she has a private kindergarten for birds here. Lord, they don't seem to be going to end at all. This is no longer a nest, but a wild poultry farm. This installation, without exaggeration, can be called the brightest advertisement at the highest possible level. Sometimes the proportions of some animals look so ridiculous that the eye refuses to believe. But take my word for it. Everything in nature is calculated down to the millimeter, and the bird needs these disproportionately long legs not for beauty at all. The unanimous and absolutely wise decision of all giraffes at once, to turn their backs to the approaching hurricane. As they say, study your center of gravity properly, so as not to fold under the wind like a crane. Some factories, it seems, produce pure happiness. Otherwise, where does this mesmerizing rainbow smoke from their chimneys come from? However, a physicist will be found who will immediately ruin everything. Smoke mixed with steam splits, sunlight into the colors of the spectrum, and that is the whole magic. In one Chinese city, residents witnessed a mysterious glow in the sky. Since the mass media kept silent, people started guessing about an unidentified flying object. But why was it engulfed in flames? Maybe people observed a breakdown or even a fire on board a spaceship. What do you say, Nummer eins? Just look at these outlandish rings. The beginning of a volcano eruption in Guatemala looks as if the mountain decided to smoke a cigarette to warm up. When bioluminescent plankton is in abundance in the water, in the dark it flashes with such a bright blue that a night trip on a yacht turns into a disco. Except the plankton had no intention of entertaining anyone. This is just a defense that turns on upon movement. And for all its beauty, it is poisonous to humans, so it is better not to drink this water. A paradox, right? Whales swallow it in tons, and nothing happens. But let's recall the proverb. What is permitted to Jupiter is not permitted. To whom? Remember the ending? Absolutely dry water. Or liquid glass, or maybe jelly. What do you generally think about this substance? Some innovative silicone? Or did they simply treat their hands with something water repellent? Speak up in the comments. They were invented exactly for this. In this profession, the stakes are literally beyond the limit, both figuratively and in the most direct sense. That is why the work of an electrician sometimes requires the bravery of a special agent and the dexterity of a circus acrobat. This is not counting the actual skills of handling high voltage. Ice melts and cracks more or less monotonously, but it knows how to freeze in the most unexpected forms. On the surface of water bodies, the so-called flat ice, resembling porcelain plates and saucers, is often born. And does anyone else imagine frozen winter water lilies in it? In one of the Mexican caves, travelers stumbled upon an inexplicable yet breathtakingly beautiful glow. What it is, a flame or a reflection, no one really understood. But now we know for sure. Such phenomena exist in the world. Something similar happened in the Philippines. Smoke started pouring out of a pit in the middle of the jungle for no reason at all. What caused it is still unclear, although it is known that so-called mud volcanoes are found there, both hot and quite capable of erupting. This really made some noise. A floating island up and formed and then dissolved just as tracelessly. Apparently, the birds had enough time to thoroughly feed. For an unknown reason, a lake in India filled with red. Someone rushed to leaf through ancient prophecies about the impending end of the world, and someone, biological reference books, where it says about algae that multiply at lightning speed and dye the water an atypical hue. What will you believe more willingly? Write in the comments. And here's a giant that met tourists off the Canadian shores. Apparently, he swam up so close not just for nothing, either so they would let scrape off stuck barnacles from him, or so that at least someone would whisper to the ecologists that he needs help. These large cats are excellent swimmers and are perfectly adapted to the bitter cold. So do not flatter yourselves considering the ice a lifeless desert. Every kitty has its own hunting fiefdom here. Call it a strange friendship or a mutually beneficial alliance, but there is definitely something going on between this crab and the jellyfish. This is not cinema, but the most genuine reality where you can catch two suns in the sky at once. Okay, I repent. One of them is an optical illusion born by the refraction of light in the ice crystals of the atmosphere. Let's say a phantom twin. Otherwise, that evening, the planet would have had to sweat fairly from the heat. The toxic light green color of the algae decisively discourages any desire to get into such water. And meanwhile, this is the very useful kelp from which the latest medicines and all kinds of commercial products are made. After such a thing, it is not easy to believe your own eyes. How is this room arranged at all, if in one corner you are a giant and in another, a Lilliputian? Have you ever been to such eccentric houses? The needle of the measuring instrument looks frankly displeased. It does not just rush about in indecision, but also sags, as if it dozed off. Curious, where does such an effect generally come from? Just look at this cloud that covered Argentina last month, as if a whole wall collapsed from the sky. The spectacle, frankly speaking, is unnerving. I wonder what it dragged along with it. Looking at this charming waterfowl, it is hard to believe that dinosaurs really went extinct. It seems to me they just shrank in size a little. A handsome one, nothing to say, and judging by the expression on the muzzle, not bloodthirsty at all. It seems a flock of birds took them hostage. It's just strange why all the anger went to a single car. The most offensive thing is that bird droppings wash off with great difficulty. None other than someone cursed these poor fellows. Although maybe on the contrary, imminent wealth awaits them. And here's a mysterious inhabitant of the ocean floor. Both a snake and a worm get along in it at once. It crawls in a snake-like way, wriggles in a worm-like way, and additionally, its body, it turns out, is flat. An incredible spectacle unfolded over the heads of the townspeople high in the sky. Blue lights look like a low, hovering, unidentified flying object. Although maybe it is just the blurred illumination of a high-rise in the fog. Some tower with white lanterns casting blue because of neighboring yellow lights. When a beam of the sun, moon, or lantern becomes wide and distinguishable from afar, it is called the glow effect. Dust and fog are to blame. Particles scatter the light, and because of that we see the beam itself in the form of a pillar or a bright stripe. Many will surely be dumbfounded upon seeing a mysterious white sphere hovering low over the ground. One is drawn to shout, "Unidentified flying object." But in reality, the sphere is a cloud seeding technology. Spraying reagents into the air, the apparatus induces rain, no witchcraft, pure science. And yet not a bad spot for filming a Western. And what is characteristic? Everything is real. Prairies, horses, cowboys, a chase, stomping and whooping. An invigorating picture. I would gladly find myself in the thick of it, and you? At first glance, it seems as if the deer is inanimate and overgrown with some kind of mold. The deer really is inanimate. It is just that a mossy tree trunk produced such an exact copy of its appearance. Entire pilgrimages often line up to such whims of nature. The cat is also perplexed. What kind of creeping sausage is this? And is it even worth attacking an unknown organism? What if it turns out to be tasteless? And again, a dome, only this time terrestrial. Here I am ready to vouch what it is. The champion in the category of the most bizarre cacti. In the wilds of Brazil, a strange pillar of smoke was noticed. Where could it come from? What do you think? Maybe some crater formed there? When landscape design turns out a bit boring, birds fly to the rescue. Without unnecessary hesitation, they erect their mini-town on a finished structure, apparently in full confidence that the Wildlife Conservation Society built it for them. It is immediately clear that this is not an ordinary tornado. Sometimes nature sets riddles that are simply too tough for us, and why it writhes so frantically is known only to this pillar itself. Bees literally occupied several trains in India. What suddenly drew them to the railway, scientists are still racking their brains over. Although, who knows? Suddenly an outstanding bee mind prompted them that there is no need to fly across half the country when you can take a breezy ride without any effort. The hum of the swarm must have almost drowned out the clatter of the wheels. We are used to considering America the birthplace of hurricanes and tornadoes. But in one of the Chinese cities, and in complete calm, a real air pipe suddenly spun up. Such gusts are called dry winds, and they are born, as a rule, in open spaces. A halo knows how to pretend to be multicolored light pillars, too. Most often, this happens in frost, when light is refracted through flat ice crystals in the air, and the entire landscape around in the blink of an eye becomes fabulous. A whole horde of uninvited night guests dives into someone's chimney. Just imagine the owner's amazement when his living room fills to the brim with bats. In Southeast Asia, rain sometimes shows rare selectivity, watering only strictly delineated areas. Who knows? What if tomorrow it decides to fall generally on a single person? Rain in Vietnam, it seems, decided that the road stop line concerns it too, and flatly refused to pour further than it, neatly keeping to a perfectly straight border. One of the most famous videos of this genre is dated the 5th of September 2012, and is tied to some Chinese street. A night surveillance camera records a cyclist and a truck inexorably converging at one point. The distance melts rapidly, and it seems that a collision is no longer avoidable. In a moment before the impact, a figure appears in the frame. It appears with a jerk, almost like a flash. The cyclist, along with the bicycle, suddenly ends up on the other side of the road, and the truck rushes past. The driver, judging by the recording, himself does not understand what happened, and brakes. Later, the video was more than once branded a setup or an advertising trick. The rescue turned out far too flawless. The speed was far too cinematic. In the year 2013, This story was linked to the Christ the King Church in the Indian state of Kerala. During the Mass, Father Thomas Pathakal, as parishioners recounted, noticed an unusual spot on the consecrated host. At first it looked like a mark on the surface, but then the outlines began to fold into a face. People approached closer, prayed, some dropped tears. For them, it was not just a flaw on a thin piece of bread, but a sign that emerged in the very heart of the sacrament. Later, the incident was discussed as a Eucharistic miracle, although official formulations sounded much more restrained. This episode is worth perceiving not as a puzzle, what was there on the host, but as a moment when the entire community simultaneously saw the same image. During a Mass, the lens was aimed at a statue. The parishioners prayed, the priest led the service, and no one expected anything unusual. But later on the recording, a movement was spotted. The hand of the statue seemed to slightly change position. The gesture was microscopic, on the very edge of perception. That is why it gives the chills. Versions abound: camera shake, shadow, perspective, editing. But for believers, the essence of the moment was important. During prayer, the image to which all eyes were riveted seemingly responded with a barely perceptible movement. This video stands out with its creepiness. A camera films a sleeping person. The room is dark and quiet. And suddenly near the body, a dark form thickens, as if a shadow peels off the sleeper and slowly crawls aside. For a couple of seconds, it seems that something independent came out of the person. Then the form dissolves, and the sleeper remains motionless, as if he felt nothing at all. There are enough explanations: light from the window, movement off camera, video compression, play of overlapping shadows. But the image turned out too piercing for a serene viewing. A roadside camera records a stream of cars and a person crossing the road. At first glance, just a risky maneuver by a pedestrian. But the longer you look closely, the more alarming the behavior of the cars is. They do not brake, do not swerve, do not honk, as if there is a void in front of them. And the figure itself looks strange. Not an ordinary passerby, but a dark contour, flat and suspiciously even for a living person. In local retellings, such footage instantly becomes overgrown with a legend. Old accidents, deceased pedestrians, a road where sometimes someone appears pop up. The technical solution could not be simpler: camera quality, dark clothing, angle, splicing of frames. But why did all the cars behave as if there was not an obstacle on the road, but an empty spot? A recording from a home camera shows how the author's daughter returns late in the evening. The car rolls into the yard, the headlights glide over the walls, a mundane finale of a trip. And only after the stop do two bright shapes flare up over the roof of the automobile. They rise smoothly, as if growing out of the space above the car, freeze for a moment, and melt into the darkness. It doesn't look much like insects. The movement is far too even. Headlights are also amiss. The source of light is already below, and the shapes seem to live their own separate life. The mother who posted the recording dubbed them guardian angels. And even if the viewer is not ready to accept such an interpretation, emotionally it is clear. Any parent knows how the heart shrinks when a child returns alone at night. That is why two lights over the car turn not just into a camera mystery, but into an image of that protection that one so wants to see. In the mountains of the Middle East, a local resident filmed several large lights hovering over a village. The exact place is usually lost in the retellings, but the video holds on not by the name of the village, but by the picture itself. Dark slopes, tiny houses, and glowing dots motionlessly hovering above them. Eyewitnesses assured that the lights looked like sentinels, not like stray lanterns and not like passing transport, but like something that watches from above. In a small settlement, such a shot instantly becomes common property. It is discussed on the streets, sent to relatives compared with legends. One can assume spotlights, reflections, drones, or an atmospheric trick. But the residents were hooked by a different feeling. Over their place, which usually doesn't even make it into the news, a sign suddenly lit up. Night, a woman behind the wheel, and an unusual glow flares up ahead on the road. She brakes, gets out with her phone, and sees a pigeon. The bird sits almost without stirring, but at the same time seems to exude a soft light itself. The author got closer and time after time repeated one question aloud. What kind of bird is this? The pigeon did not flutter up, did not struggle, did not show a shadow of fright. In the middle of a deserted night highway, this calmness looked terrifyingly unnatural. Viewers immediately threw in earthly versions: headlight glare, white plumage, sickness, paint, reflective film. But the symbolism outweighed any expertise. To many, a white dove is firmly associated with the Holy Spirit, peace, and intercession. And if such a bird stops you at night in the middle of the road, it is almost impossible to get rid of the thought: what if you were delayed not by chance? Right during a church service, a white bird flew into the hall. Usually birds in a room rush about, crash into glass, feverishly look for an exit. But this pigeon glided imperturbably, as if it knew the route exactly, and landed right on the head of the statue of Jesus. Silence hung in the hall. No one rushed to chase it away, made a noise. Everyone just watched. Sometimes a symbol works exactly like this. It explains nothing to anyone, but forces everyone to freeze for a few seconds. The bird could have flown in through the wide open door and landed on the highest point where it was more convenient for it. Except within the walls of the temple, the convenient point turned out to be the image of Christ and the white dove, one of the most recognizable religious symbols. Thus, an ordinary incident turned into a scene that the parishioners will remember as a blessing. A mother films her son in the yard. The child rushes around, bursting with laughter, trees, and daylight all around. Such a fragment is usually not rewatched a second time, a family video and nothing more. But later the woman notices a translucent movement by the tree. A haze crawls out of the shadow. For a second gathers into a semblance of a figure and seems to shift following the boy. No distinct face, no solid body, and exactly this blurriness acts the strongest. This is not an object you will pick a name for, but a form somewhere between light, dust, and a silhouette. In the comments, they guessed vyingly: a midge near the lens, a glare, a speck of dust, or even the spirit of a deceased pet. The mother spoke of something else, of a feeling. After viewing, she was left not with anxiety, but with a strange calmness. As if that day, the son was playing not under an empty tree, but under someone's quiet supervision. In the Mexican neighborhood of Peñón de los Baños, according to the descriptions of eyewitnesses, people were preparing for a traditional performance on Good Friday. Attention was supposed to be riveted to the street, to the participants, to the earthly ceremony. But at some point, the crowd threw their heads up. The clouds parted in such a way that the shape of a cross was outlined between them. The geometry is not perfect, but distinct enough for people to grab their phones all at once. Light broke through the gap, and the cross seemed to glow from the inside. On the day when the crucifixion is remembered, a cross appears right over their heads. One can write it all off to clouds and sunbeams, but for those who stood below, the coincidence turned out to be too accurate to keep silent. On a road recording, a motorcyclist rolls along his lane, and at first nothing alerts, and then danger sneaks up. The distance shortens, and in a matter of seconds, everything escalates into a potential accident. And at this moment, a dark figure appears nearby. It seems to throw itself towards the motorcyclist, or crosses his path, after which the trajectory changes. This could be a shadow, a person, a camera artifact, or superimposition of frames. But the video catches by the fact that the viewer himself turns into an investigator, chases the moment in a circle, struggling to understand what exactly ended up nearby in the most decisive second. In one church video, attention was riveted by a glow emanating from the tabernacle. The camera films the serene space of the temple, but then near the shrine, a light flares up, far too clear and bright for an ordinary background. One can nod at candles, metal, glass, or the angle. But here the place itself decides. The light lights up exactly where believers are already waiting for the presence of the sacred. A bird flew into the hall where the icon was located. Usually such birds dart about and frantically look for an exit, but this one flew up to the image and for a moment bowed its head, as if it bowed to it. The people around froze. The movement was tiny, but so expressive. A living creature seemed to repeat a gesture of reverence where people are used to praying. Perhaps the bird was merely looking for support or accidentally tilted down. But sometimes a powerful scene needs neither thunder nor lightning. A 7-year-old boy named Asher was flying home on an airplane after a trip to his older brother. During the flight, he snapped clouds through the porthole, a usual childish undertaking to catch a beautiful view behind the glass. Later, his mom, Carrie, was leafing through the pictures and got stuck on one shot. Among the clouds, a bright figure showed white, similar to a soaring silhouette. The mother immediately read it as her son's guardian angel. A special poignancy was added to the story by the fact that Asher was born with Down syndrome, and in the family, he was spoken of as a child who himself brings a lot of light into the house. They argued in the network, a reflection in the glass, the shape of a cloud, editing, or a happy accident. But for Carrie, the picture did not claim the role of evidence for court. It became her personal symbol of protection. Sometimes such shots are not at all obliged to over-persuade the entire internet. It is enough that they answer a single family. On another video, a family was filming an infant right after baptism. In the frame, a church, relatives, and quiet joy upon the completion of the rite. But later on the recording, a soft glow was noticed near the baby. It flared up for a moment, as if light slid nearby and immediately extinguished. For some viewers, this is a glare from candles or a reflection in the lens. For the family, a sign that coincided with the most important moment of the day. Had such a light arisen somewhere casually, it would have simply been forgotten. But after a baptism, it turns into a story that is rewatched no longer as a curiosity, but as a blessing. In a Mexican village, a man was going through a black streak. By his admission, he no longer begged for money, nor luck, nor deliverance from troubles. He prayed only for a sign, for anything that would convince him. There, upstairs, they hear him. Towards evening, he stepped over the threshold and noticed a flash over the horizon. In the first moment, it could have been taken for a bird, a drone, or a glare. But it moved far too smoothly, and the outlines were far too telling. A bright figure soaring upward, and two wide shapes on the sides, exactly like wings. He managed to film only a couple of seconds, but even that was enough for the video to go from hand to hand. First among neighbors, and then across social networks. Skeptics made out a play of light in it. The author himself stood his ground. He almost soundlessly asked for a sign, raised his head, and saw something that the tongue could no longer turn to call simply a cloud. In the United States of America, a man released a recording from a home camera. Right by the porch, a large glowing orb appears and floats along a ridiculous broken trajectory. It doesn't pass for an ordinary speck of dust that rushes headlong in front of the lens. And it doesn't flicker like a midge by the infrared illumination. Context made the story personal. Shortly before this, the author buried his mother and was in that state when any trifle is read as a message. That's why he perceived the light by the house not as a technical glitch, but as a visit, a short, "I am near" from a place you cannot call. The next day, according to him, he met a person who helped him survive the most acute bout of grief. The coincidence can be twisted any way you want, but such videos do not aim to convince everyone indiscriminately. Their strength lies elsewhere. Sometimes one strange spark does not turn the world upside down, but gives a person the strength to hold out for another 24 hours. On a night recording, a man is returning home, and out of the gloom, a stranger suddenly lunges at him. The camera is far away and the picture is blurred. Therefore, at first, we see only the threat. One person is not yet ready and the other is already almost hovering over him. And suddenly near the victim, a dark dash flashes. The figure seems to detach from his body or from his own shadow, makes a lunge towards the attacker, and the latter loses his advantage at once. Everything lasts so lightning fast that one is drawn to analyze the video frame by frame. There is no neat solution to this episode. A shadow from a lantern, a digital artifact, a second person who cannot be properly made out, or a bizarre superimposition of movement. At first glance, an ordinary city camera. A woman with a stroller is crossing the road. The cars are far away. The traffic seems measured. Then one automobile flies out far too rapidly, and the mundane scene in a fraction of a second becomes critical. The most terrifying thing in such videos is the feeling of mathematical predestination. The car is speeding, the woman is already on the trajectory, the stroller is ahead. But at the very moment when the collision looks almost inevitable, a blurred male figure slips through the frame. And then, a jump. Both the woman and the stroller are already out of danger. Such things are often written down as editing legends, and this is quite likely. Bethlehem is a place where even a routine filming of an icon is read differently. According to the author, he was filming the image of Jesus during a prayer in the Church of the Nativity. The shot was pacified. Candles, shadows, the surface of the image, the unhurried movement of people around. And suddenly it seemed to him that the gaze on the image had changed. The eyes seemingly half opened, and below protruded dark, wet tracks, similar to tears. A few seconds, and the image froze again. The man rewatched the recording and decided to post it, because he himself could not figure out what he had filmed. Some will reduce everything to the reflection of candles, camera shake, and pareidolia. Others, to a crying image where millions of people have prayed for consolation for centuries. A man was filming a waterfall in a remote Japanese village. According to the idea, he wanted to capture a beautiful place. The stream, boulders, moist air, the roar of water. And suddenly a dark form emerges in the very curtain of water. At first it is just an unevenness in the streams, and then the gaze begins to mold a silhouette out of it, as if someone hunched over is standing behind the water or right inside it. The camera zooms in, and the figure now drowns in the splashes, now surfaces again. In Japan, waterfalls are often revered as places of purification and natural power, so viewers quickly gave the video a sacred tinge. But it is better to leave room for doubt. Perhaps it is just a stone, shadow, and water. And perhaps such corners have been considered the boundary between the ordinary and the unseen for centuries, precisely because nature itself sometimes tries on a human guise. In Rio de Janeiro, a local resident was filming Mount Corcovado and the statue of Christ the Redeemer. The panorama is powerful in itself. The city spread out below, the monument with wide open arms, the sky above it. But the author's gaze was riveted by a glow that flared up over the statue. The light seemed to soar upwards and melted in the air. Zooming in the picture, the author assured that a human figure was discernible inside. Although the quality of the recording left room for doubt. The video was instantly picked up for discussion, and all because of the filming location. Context decides almost everything here. Light over an ordinary roof would have been written off as a glare, a bird, or a cloud. But light over Christ the Redeemer, the viewer mechanically reads differently. The symbol is already standing in the frame, and any flickering above it seems part of a grandiose message, even if technically it is ordinary optics. On the 21st of April, 2021, a woman cast a glance at the baby monitor screen and saw a bright orb of light in the nursery. It glided right by the crib, changed course, and lingered in such a way that it did not immediately look like an ordinary speck of dust. But it really sent chills down the spine at the moment when the toddler extended his little hand as if reaching for the light. And exactly at the second, the orb disappeared. For the mother, this was not detached observation of a curiosity, but a situation where something beyond her control was happening next to her child. Baby monitors have artifacts in abundance. Infrared illumination, midges, specks of dust, reflections. But it is exactly the baby's reaction that made the video famous. An adult will compose an interpretation already after viewing, but a child simply reaches for what he sees. And this very gesture makes the frame simultaneously alarming and achingly tender. In the sky over Ukraine, according to eyewitnesses, a cloud in the shape of an angel emerged. Against the backdrop of alarming events, such footage instantly becomes overgrown with special meaning. People peer not just into outlines, they look out for hope in them. The silhouette really looked like a bright figure with wide-open wings. Some saw in it a sign of protection, others, an ordinary play of clouds and light. But it is understandable why the video scattered. When there's so much pain around, even a cloud is capable of becoming an image, whispering to a person that he is not alone. A night camera snatched a figure on a deserted street. At first, an ordinary passerby, but then it dawns. The light around him is somehow wrong. The contours are seemingly illuminated from within, and the gait is smoother than that of a normal person. The author never could vouch for who it was, a living person, a reflection of headlights, or a glitch of night filming. Cameras in the dark are generally willing to distort reality. They stretch light, turn midges into orbs, and pedestrians into incorporeal silhouettes. A woman was standing on the porch and filming a thunderstorm. The camera waited for the familiar, spectacular flash. A swollen sky, electrified air, a roar somewhere in the distance. Lightning blazed, and along with it, a glowing object appeared in the frame. On a slow-motion replay, the form turned into a silhouette with wings. Not clear, not postcard-like, but expressive enough for the author herself to get scared and dart into the house. Only later, rewatching the recording, did she notice that the strange image pops up exactly after the flash. Rationally, this is written off to overexposure, a reflection, a plasma effect, a drop on the lens, or a camera feature. But a thunderstorm is always perceived as a moment when the sky approaches closer and becomes more dangerous. That is why a bright figure inside a lightning strike hits something primal. For a second, it seems that the discharge did not just illuminate the street, but slightly opened something behind it. A traveler was filming a waterfall in Greece, and at first the shot passed for the most ordinary tourist video. Stones, a stream, splashes, the sun at an oblique angle. And then a bright silhouette emerged in the water dust. It did not stand like a stone statue. The form gathered, then crumbled, then arose again in the streams. For a few seconds, the water turned into a transparent human figure, as if someone froze inside the curtain and manifests only with fortunate light. On the 9th of December, 2025, as the captions under the video stated, a man and his son noticed a glowing orb near the house. Less than 3 weeks remained until Christmas, and this calendar background immediately reshaped the perception of the video. The object floated over the ground softly, without a single jerk. The boy looked up mesmerized. The father filmed, and the whole scene turned out not frightening, but almost festive. After publication, other users started writing that they also saw similar lights in their parts, and one video grew into a whole string of small stories. Most likely, such light has a prosaic solution: a drone, a lantern, a reflection, a weather phenomenon. But in December, even an ordinary little light warms the soul. People are already tuned into a miracle, so a strange dot in the sky easily turns not into a threat, but into a promise. Something bright may still be waiting ahead. Sometimes the savior in the frame looks not like a glowing silhouette, but the most ordinary dog. On a recording from a street camera, a girl wanders along the road alone. A car brakes nearby, the door opens, and the child, judging by the movements, clearly does not want to approach. The shot oppresses precisely with its everyday silence. No crowd, no adult nearby, no instant help. The girl backs away. The driver keeps saying something, and the situation visibly fills with a threat. And here a dog bursts into the frame. It rushes to the car and breaks into such furious barking that the driver slams the door shut and drives away. To give you goosebumps, this video needs no mysticism. The dog could have been protecting its territory or a child familiar to it. But something else is more important to us. Help comes not a minute later, not after a scream, but exactly when any delay would turn into a disaster. On the 4th of April, 2020, judging by the captions under the videos, residents of Sao Paulo made out a cloud in the sky resembling a colossal horseman. The date here is not a trifle. The world lived in anxiety, people desperately clung to any symbols, and the figure in the heavens immediately received a religious interpretation. From below, it really looked like a rider on a horse, an elongated top, a bright body, circling clouds around. Someone imagined Christ on a white horse, someone a banal dance of wind and moisture. Later, another video began to be attached to the plot, already with a dark horseman at the edge of the shore, although the connection between them is highly doubtful. In Colorado, according to the author of the video, a woman had long prayed for a personal sign. Not for a miracle for the news feeds and not for proof for outsiders, just for something she would understand herself. And so, one day, rolling along the highway with her husband, she saw an unusual cloud over the horizon. In shape, it resembled a tall human figure. Above its head, a strip of sky glowed, which made the silhouette acquire a semblance of a halo. The woman stopped the car and grabbed the camera. She was afraid that in a minute the cloud would disperse. A skeptic will declare this pareidolia and will be within his rights. But the woman herself did not need to out-argue the skeptic, but to feel that her internal question did not sink into the void. A night camera films a sleepy road, streetlights, empty asphalt, rare cars, and here a vertical, bright, translucent figure appears in the frame. At first it looks like a person, visible only half, and then begins to shrink and melt. The author of the recording admitted that the silhouette reminded him of a neighbor. He used to frequently stroll along the street around this hour, but shortly before the video appeared, he died. After such a detail, an ordinary camera glitch turns into a story about a last route. You cannot verify the resemblance. Maybe it's the light of headlights, a reflection, a sensor glitch, or a passerby distorted by night filming. But the very thought does not let go. The place seemingly preserves the memory of a person through his habit. A German video from the year 2006 became viral again years later. 3 children are recording a greeting for their mom. Balloons, laughter, a homey room, nothing ominous. A mirror hangs behind their backs, and exactly in it a pale figure was later made out. The silhouette is bright, almost winged. The children see nothing and just keep talking into the camera. And a couple of seconds later, the mirror falls and breaks into pieces. And this moment turns a strange reflection into a full-fledged legend. Of course, the mirror could have been poorly fastened. The figure could have turned out to be a reflection of a person off camera, a glare, or a fold of light. But the set is far too fortunate for a calm viewing. Children, a family greeting, a stranger's silhouette behind the back, and the sudden ringing of glass. That is why the video is perceived as a home recording into which something extraneous casually slipped. A group of friends settled by a campfire. Night conversations, filming on a phone, the usual atmosphere of rest. During the recording, no one notices anything special, and only later do viewers distinguish a form in the smoke above the flame, similar to a winged figure. Fire tirelessly molds random images. Faces, beasts, silhouettes are imagined in it. The brain loves to extract meaning from chaos. But here the form holds together solidly enough for people to start forwarding the video with the question, "Are you seeing this too?" In a cemetery, a little girl stands by the grave of a native person. Loved ones film her from afar. The child quietly says something, as if addressing someone who is no longer around. And at some point, a slight haze, a translucent movement appears near her. The girl looks aside and makes a tiny gesture as if someone invisible is answering her. Of course, this could be light, wind, specks of dust, or a camera feature. There is almost nothing scary here. There is a child, there is a loss, and there is a feeling that love sometimes looks for a loophole to manifest, even where only an inscription on a stone remains. In a hospital ward, a camera records that very heavy silence, a bed, equipment, dim light, and suddenly near the patient, a bright glow spills out, which you cannot immediately write off to a lamp or reflection. Relatives perceive this as the presence of an angel or a loved one who appeared to support in the most difficult hour. Skeptical arguments are understandable. Glass, a device, movement off camera, quirks of the camera. But in a hospital, such footage is viewed in a special way. There, light is valuable not because it interprets everything, but because it helps to survive what defies explanation. A home camera records an ordinary morning or day. A woman is getting ready to go out. A little grandson is spinning around. Ordinary domestic bustle. Not a hint of the gloomy. But the toddler suddenly clings to her, as if letting go is absolutely impossible. Not begging for a toy, not acting up at a distance, literally holding her in place. The woman smiles, struggles to free herself, but the boy is only more stubborn. And almost immediately, a lightning strikes outside the door. The flash and the crash are so sharp that after them the child's behavior no longer passes for a normal whim. Relatives later mentioned, had she gone out a couple of seconds earlier, and everything could have turned out differently. You cannot verify this, but the scene hooks with its simplicity. This video is usually presented as a recording from a cave in one of the sacred corners of the Middle East. A man steps inside with a camera, tuned to see stones, a dark corridor, and signs of antiquity. But right at the entrance, he notices a light that does not look like an ordinary sunbeam. The closer he gets, the noticeably his voice changes. Deep inside, a human figure seemed to freeze, but it shines so blindingly that the contours blur. The camera catches overexposure, the author's breathing becomes heavier, and the recording itself starts to sound like an encounter with something for which he was absolutely not ready. One can assume many things: reflection, an opening with the sun, a person in a bright garment, a setup. In March of the year 2025, a woman from the British Holmer Green told about a strange incident at her home. According to her, she was fond of meditation and energy practices, and shortly before that asked her spiritual guides to give her a sign. At about 10 in the evening, she stepped over the threshold and distinctly heard, "Hello." Not the hum of pipes, not the creak of a floorboard, but a short human greeting. The woman froze, started calling out, "Who is here?" But in response, silence. The house, according to her assurance, was empty. This story differs from others in that, in essence, there is nothing to show. What frightens here is not the picture, but the sound. You will dub a light a glare, a shadow, a camera miss, a cloud, an accident. But when in a deserted house, someone seemingly greets you, a rational explanation will no longer return the former feeling of peace. This recording, according to the relatives, was made at a funeral in March of the year 2024. The family was saying goodbye to their grandfather, and they filmed not at all for the internet, but to save the ceremony for those who were not able to arrive. Already at home, someone noticed movement in the floral arrangement. It wasn't the whole wreath or the stand that swayed. Only one small element was trembling, as if it was carefully fingered. The wind at that moment did not touch neighboring flowers. No one was passing nearby, and this very selectivity forced the relatives to stop the video. To an outsider, all this will seem like nonsense, a draft, a poorly fastened ribbon, floor vibrations. But for the family, the gesture hit right in a sore spot. They saw not horror, but a farewell, as if a person whom you can no longer embrace found the last quiet way to whisper, "I am near." Well, friends, which of these videos shook you the most? Share in the comments. And be sure to write the code word ROCKET. This way I will understand that you watched to the very finale. And for us, this is truly important. Want a continuation or something in the same vein? Also, drop a line about this in the comments. Hit the like button and subscribe to the TopFacts channel, where the most incredible facts and videos from all over the internet are gathered. Thank you for being with us, and right now turn on previous stunning episodes. They have already popped up on your screen.